Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere cold. Not just shiver under your blanket cold. This is icy wind slicing through wooden walls, fingers cracked and bleeding, firewood running low, kind of cold. You're in Salem Village, Massachusetts. It's 1692, and honestly, you probably won't survive this. This isn't your cute, cozy New England postcard. It's bitter. Literally. The crops were weak this year, debts are up, and there's been more fighting in nearby towns than usual. People turning up dead or missing or worse. Families huddle inside rough timber houses, lighting candles at dusk, whispering prayers louder now because something is wrong in the woods, or maybe in the hearts of their neighbours. You step outside and your boots crunch into the packed snow. The sun is gone and the air smells like pine and smoke. There's always smoke. A thin column rising from every chimney, barely enough to keep the frost from growing on the inside of your windows. It's not even officially witch trial season yet, but already the village feels off. Everyone's watching everyone. Doors close a little faster when you walk by. Children are quiet, not in a shy way, in a practiced, terrified way. And then you're inside the Parris house. Reverend Samuel Parris, minister of Salem Village, not exactly winning any popularity contests. His sermons are harsh. He talks a lot about hell, and not in a fun, abstract way, in a "you're definitely going there" way. He thinks the devil is just out of frame. You can feel that belief in his house. The corner's too dark, the Bible opened and waiting on the table like a warning. His daughter Betty is lying on the floor. Not sick, more like seized. She flinches and jerks. Her eyes roll back and her fingers twitch like she's playing an invisible harpsichord. Beside her, her cousin Abigail Williams isn't much better. She mutters things you can't quite hear. You try to speak, but they scream. At nothing. Or maybe at something you can't see. Reverend Parris doesn't know what to do, neither does the town doctor, and this is where things begin to go sideways. The doctor arrives and pokes and prods, listens to the girls, mutters a few Latin phrases like seasoning. Finally, he stands up and delivers his totally medically sound verdict. This is no ordinary illness. They've been afflicted. That's 1692 for possessed, or hexed. His diagnosis is, and I quote, "It must be the evil hand." You'd like a second opinion, but unfortunately this is the best you're going to get. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I post stories like this every week, deep dives into weird history, messy people, and moments that shaped how we got here. Drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always cool to see where and when you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. By the next morning, everyone knows about the girls, and more importantly, everyone has an opinion. When I say it's nerves, some say they're faking it. Others mutter that perhaps something darker has taken root. You watch as neighbours stop talking in the streets. Conversations drop to whispers. That's how hysteria works, not in a loud bang, but in 100 quiet steps. And you're about to walk each one. Then there's Tituba. You meet her in the kitchen. She's stirring something in a pot that smells earthy and strange. She's a slave from the Caribbean, owned by Reverend Parris, and already seen as suspicious, not just because of where she's from or the colour of her skin, but because she tells stories about spirits, about omens, about little tricks to protect yourself. The girls listen to her. That much is clear. They might have even begged her to do something, a ritual, a game, something fun. In Puritan Salem, there's no room for fun. Here's the historical fact. That first week of strange afflictions took place during the coldest months of 1692. Winter often marked periods of increased spiritual paranoia in Puritan New England. Less sunlight, more illness, tighter quarters, and frayed nerves. Now here's the fringe fact. Some researchers in the 1970s floated a theory that the girls' behaviour might have come from ergot poisoning. Basically, eating mouldy rye bread that causes hallucinations. It's a long-shot theory, but honestly, not the wildest part of this story. And here's your scholarly debate. Were the girls deliberately faking their fits for attention or personal revenge, or did they truly believe they were cursed? Historians still can't agree. Some say it was manipulation, others say it was mass hysteria. The only thing everyone agrees on is, once it started, it spread fast. You lean closer to the fire as the Parris household descends into chaos. More girls begin to twitch. Names are whispered. Accusations are forming like frost on a window pane. And outside, the village is starting to gather. They've seen things like this before, in books, in sermons, in Europe maybe, but never here, never this close. And deep in the woods, beyond the reach of lantern light, something is waiting. Not a demon, not really, just the shape of fear with a new name. You step out of the parsonage and into the slush-crusted streets of Salem Village. There's a crunch beneath your boots as frost bites at your ankles, and the smell of wood smoke snakes through the air. The sun's barely risen, and already people are murmuring. This thing, whatever it is, demonic possession, witchcraft, divine punishment, girls being dramatic, it's spreading faster than anyone can contain. Inside every candlelit kitchen, there's one question now. Who's next? You follow Reverend Parris as he hurries to the meeting house, robes flapping like frightened crows. His face is pale, his eyes sunken, but he doesn't slow down. The elders are gathering, the church leaders, the landowners. They've all heard what's happening in his home, what his daughter and niece are doing, and they want answers. You sit in the back pew, cold wood pressing into your spine as the council argues. Some say the girls need to be punished. Others say they need prayers and fasting. But one voice cuts through the rest. Thomas Putnam. His tone is calm, too calm, like someone already picking out enemies. He leans forward, mentions land disputes, then subtly points out which families have connection to strange behaviour. His fingers never move, but you can feel him pointing. The Putnams have old grudges and hungry ambition, and now they smell opportunity. Back in the Parris household, Betty and Abigail's fits are getting worse. They scream when people come near. They claim to see things no one else can. Black dogs, flying shapes, a woman in a cloak scratching their faces at night. Abigail suddenly clutches her throat and cries, "She chokes me, her spirit chokes me." You see Reverend Parris go very still. He turns toward the girls. "Who?" he asks. "Who torments you?" The room holds its breath, and just like that, the door creaks open on a whole new kind of nightmare. Tituba, the name slips out like smoke. Then another. Sarah Good, a poor homeless woman known for muttering to herself and smoking a pipe. Scandalous. Then a third, Sarah Osborne. She hasn't been to church in over a year and married her servant. Unthinkable. 3 names, 3 women, 3 accusations, and the villagers pounce like wolves on a fresh trail. You watch Sarah Good walk through the muddy street, clutching her coat around her thin frame. She looks tired. She is tired. She's a beggar, a mother, and already hated by half the town. When they accuse her, she barely reacts. She's seen worse. But when her own daughter is pulled in to testify against her, just 4 years old, you feel something in your chest twist. Sarah Osborne is sick in bed when they come for her. She barely lifts her head as they drag her out. No one offers her a blanket. And Tituba, well, she knows exactly what kind of story they want. You're there in the cramped room as she's interrogated. Her voice is quiet, her hands still, but her eyes dance like flame. She tells them what they already believe. Yes, she saw witches. Yes, she signed the devil's book. Yes, there are others. Many others. She spins a tale that is part confession, part survival tactic. You can almost hear her thinking, if I give them what they want, maybe they won't hang me. And for now, she's right. Here's the historical fact. The first official accusations of witchcraft in Salem came on February 29th, 1692, when warrants were issued for Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. The complaints were filed by the Thomas Putnam and his allies, setting off a legal domino effect that quickly spiralled. Here's your fringe fact. Some scholars argue that the girls may have been experimenting with fortune-telling using an old English folk method involving egg whites and glasses of water, basically DIY Puritan divination. If true, that tiny moment of play could have been the spark that lit the whole village on fire. And your scholarly debate for tonight: was Tituba's confession a calculated attempt to protect herself, or had she been genuinely coerced, confused, or even brainwashed into believing she had participated in witchcraft? Some historians say she weaponized their fears to save her own life. Others argue she had no real choice. You walk behind the constable now, lanterns swinging in the wind as he leads the accused women to jail. It's dark. There are no street lamps, just flickering candlelight and torches, and the thick silence of a town that feels like it's sleepwalking into something it won't be able to undo. The jail smells like old rot and wet stone. You step inside and the cold hits you deeper than before. It's not just winter. It's dread. Tituba is thrown into a cell with straw on the floor and nothing else. Sarah Good is muttering again. Sarah Osborne tries to pray but forgets the words halfway through. There's no justice here, only waiting. Outside, the village starts to change. People begin sleeping with knives under their pillows. Doors are locked tighter. Eyes are sharper. If the devil is among them, he isn't wearing horns. He's wearing wool and a frown and maybe standing right behind you at church. The girls, they're just getting started. Their symptoms spread like wildfire. More girls join the afflicted. More names are shouted through the haze of tears and gasps. You can feel it building. This isn't about justice. This is about fear, about power, about control. And deep inside you there's a tiny whisper. What if they're right? What if the devil is here? And then that whisper turns into a shiver that never quite leaves you. You wake to the sound of hooves slapping frozen earth. It's still dark, barely past dawn, but the village is wide awake. News spreads fast here, too fast. And this morning it carries 3 names on a bitter wind. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, Tituba, the devil's new apprentices, according to the whispers. And this time there's paperwork. Official arrest warrants signed, sealed, delivered. No longer just gossip muttered over firewood. Now it's law. You follow the crowd as they head to Ingersoll's Tavern, which is doubling as the makeshift courtroom for today's hearings. This isn't a trial. Not yet. It's a preliminary examination, though let's not kid ourselves. No one's getting out of this room looking better than when they walked in. The room is packed. Everyone wants a glimpse. There's hay on the floor, sweat in the air, and an undertone of something else, fear maybe, or excitement disguised as moral outrage. Judge John Hathorne, a man with the expression of a stone fence, presides alongside Judge Jonathan Corwin, who looks like he's trying to look important without letting on that he's a little spooked. They sit high above the crowd while the accused women stand below, exhausted, shivering and, at least in Sarah Osborne's case, barely able to stand at all. Sarah Good is first. Her face is set in lines so deep they look carved. When asked if she serves Satan, she doesn't flinch. "I am no more a witch than you are a wizard," she spits. This is not the tone the court is looking for. Immediately, murmurs ripple through the crowd like wind across tall grass. You're supposed to sob, beg, confess, not throw sass at the judges. Sarah Osborne is too ill to say much. Her words trail off, slurred and soft. The court sees this not as evidence of poor health, but of guilt. "The devil is sancing her," someone whispers. You catch eyes with another onlooker. Neither of you knows what to believe. Then comes Tituba. You can feel the tensions. Bike. She's brought in separately. Hands bound, head bowed. But when she speaks, her voice is strong. Calmer than expected. More rehearsed than you'd like. She says yes, she saw strange creatures. Yes, she signed a book the devil gave her. Yes, there were others. Witches, many. Their names are still hidden, but they walk among you. This is the moment everything changes. Tituba's confession confirms what the court wants to believe. Not just that witchcraft exists, but that it is organised, a network, a conspiracy. And she's just the first to talk. She describes a tall man in black, talking animals flying through the trees, a book with red ink and many names. She weaves the perfect storm of imagery, foreign enough to be feared, familiar enough to feel real. You realise with a chill that she's saying exactly what they need to hear. And maybe, just maybe, that's why she survives. Here's your historical fact. Tituba's confession on March 1392 was the first to introduce the idea of a witchcraft coven in New England. Her vivid descriptions provided a theological justification to pursue more arrests, and soon after, accusations exploded. Now your quirky fact. During her confession, Tituba claimed the devil appeared to her in the form of various animals, including a hog, a dog, and even a yellow bird. That bird will come back later, oddly enough. During several other women's trials, apparently even evil spirits have brand mascots. And tonight's scholarly debate. Did Tituba truly believe what she was saying, perhaps shaped by her own cultural beliefs and trauma? Or was this entirely performative, a deliberate manipulative move to spare herself torture or execution? Historians have argued for both interpretations, and we'll never truly know what was in her heart that day. You step outside for air, but it doesn't help. The cold air burns your lungs and the village feels more crowded than ever. Everyone's staring at everyone. Every sideways glance is suspect. Children imitate the afflicted girls, rolling their eyes back and shrieking just for fun, or maybe not. You can't tell anymore. By the week's end, the panic takes root. The girls claim new visions. More names are whispered. People begin begging the judges to listen to their suspicions. It becomes a civic duty to accuse. The only way to be safe is to point at someone else. And when that someone is an old rival, a debtor, or the strange widow who never remarried, well, even better. The local jail, never built for more than a handful of drunkards and petty thieves, is suddenly overflowing. Entire families are locked up. Infants shiver beside mothers in cells with no heat, no food, no blankets. You pass one cell and see an old man praying quietly. Next to him is a teenage girl who hasn't spoken in 3 days, just stares at the wall. More magistrates are called in, more confessions demanded. The legal machine is groaning to life and it's hungry. The devil, you realise, doesn't need to show up in Salem. He's already here, stitched into the paranoia, baked into every whisper and hiding behind every righteous frown. And still, you wonder, what if there is something supernatural going on? That's the hook, isn't it? The Puritans believed they were soldiers in a divine war, that the wilderness around them wasn't just forest, it was chaos, a place where Satan walked freely, where civilization ended and evil began. The line between the physical and spiritual world was paper thin. So when young girls started seizing and pointing, it wasn't metaphorical, it was warfare. The truth, you don't know yet. But as more villagers are dragged toward justice with rough hands and raw wrists, you realise something chilling. It doesn't matter. Whether this began with lies, fear, poison, trauma, or even something real, it's become unstoppable, and you're not sure you'll make it out alive. You wake again to more names. They hang in the air like chimney smoke, sticky, acrid, impossible to ignore. The list is growing, swelling like a bruise, and it's not just poor beggars or slaves anymore. This time it's good wives. Women with property, reputations, husbands. The accusations are moving up the social ladder now, and that ladder is starting to creak. You're standing outside the meeting house when they bring in Martha Corey. She's calm, dignified, maybe a little impatient. She's not like the others, they all know it. She reads, for one thing, speaks her mind, and she goes to church every Sunday. Her husband, Giles, looks like he was carved from granite and forgot to smile in 1650. Together they've survived droughts, debt and disease, but even that armour can't stop what's coming. Martha doesn't scream or weep, and she doesn't faint when the afflicted girls start their usual routine, clutching their throats, falling to the floor, writhing like snakes on a hot stone. Instead, she folds her arms and says the worst thing possible. "This is nonsense." That does it. The crowd turns colder than the sky. To question the afflicted is to question God's truth, and Martha just did it in public. You want to respect her bravery, but a part of you knows it's a fatal move, and sure enough, as the court erupts into chaos, the girls start to mimic her movements. If Martha shifts her arm, so do they. If she sighs, they collapse. The judges don't see performance. They see spectral evidence. Spectral evidence. The idea that a person's spirit could leave their body and torment others while they appeared innocent is the courtroom's favourite tool right now. There's no proof, no logic, no defence. It's like being accused of murder because someone dreamed you stabbed them. And guess what? Dreams count as evidence. Here's your historical fact. The Salem court was one of the only places in colonial America where spectral evidence was formally accepted as legitimate testimony. Cotton Mather later suggested it should be used with caution, but early on it was practically the cornerstone of the trials. And now for something weird. In one hearing, the girls claimed they were being attacked by a yellow bird only they could see. They said it perched on the accused woman's shoulder, feeding on her soul. Yes, a spectral parakeet of evil. And the court didn't blink. As for tonight's scholarly debate, historians still argue how much the judges truly believed the afflicted. Were they manipulated? Were they trying to maintain control of a fracturing society? Or did they just want to be seen as heroes of a spiritual war? Theories abound. Self-delusion, groupthink, power lust, maybe all of it. Back in the jail, the mood has curdled. You walk the halls and it smells of sweat and fear and mouldy hay. New prisoners are arriving daily. People you saw just last week at market, now coughing in chains, praying through cracked lips. You hear one woman asking to see her child. The guard tells her to be silent. Another sobs quietly, repeating, I'm innocent, like it's a spell that might open the door. You want to scream, or maybe sleep for a year. Outside, the wind carries rumours that dogs have gone mad, that cattle are dying, that crops are rotting in the ground. People start looking for omens in everything. Dead birds, broken tools, sour milk. The devil is blamed for all of it. But you get the sense that blame is what this village really worships. Not God, not scripture. Blame. Pure directionless blame. And it's not just women anymore. Men are being accused too. You're there when John Proctor is dragged in. Yes, that John Proctor, the respected farmer with the sharp tongue and bad habit of calling things as they are. He's already made enemies by criticising the trials, saying the girls are lying, saying the judges are fools. He's not subtle. So naturally, Abigail Williams points at him next. His arrest hits differently. He's not a widow or a beggar. He's a landowner. A man, but that doesn't protect him. If anything, it makes him more dangerous. If he can fall, anyone can. The prison groans under the weight of it all. Over 100 people now, crammed into damp cells. Some confess to save themselves, most don't. The confessed witches are kept alive so they can name more names. The innocent? They're the ones you really have to worry about. They're the ones who hang. You start to notice the way people shift in the streets. Former friends avoid each other. Couples whisper behind closed shutters, and always the girls are at the centre, performing their convulsions like actors in a never-ending play. 1 minute they're crying that someone's spirit is biting them. The next, they're calmly eating bread and cheese. It would almost be funny if people weren't dying over it. Still, you can't deny the girls believe something. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes when they scream, it's blood-curdling, raw, as if they're being dragged underwater. Maybe it's power. Maybe it's trauma. Maybe something deeper has broken loose inside them, something they can't put back in. And then there's Giles Corey, Martha's husband. He's old, grizzled, not exactly a romantic, but when they try to force him into a plea, guilty or innocent, he refuses to speak, says nothing, not out of pride, but because he knows how the game works. If he pleads, they seize his land. If he stays silent, it passes to his sons. So the court finds another way. They lay him on the ground, naked, place a board across his chest, then begin piling heavy stones on top, one at a time, and with each one they ask him to speak. He groans, he bleeds, but all he says is, more weight. You weren't ready for that part. No one is. There's something sickly sweet about the way people start to gather when they hear another good wife is about to be named. They say they're coming for justice, for piety, for the cleansing of the village, but you can tell it's something else. It's the thrill, the charged stillness before a name is spoken, like waiting for thunder after a flash. It's addictive. And today, the lightning is aimed at Rebecca Nurse. You remember her? Of course you do. Everyone does. She's old, kind, soft-spoken, a grandmother with milk-warm eyes and worn-out hands. She's the woman who tended the sick when no one else would. She's the one who offered to rock another woman's crying baby during a sermon without even being asked. She is the last person anyone thought could be accused of consorting with the devil, which is why it works. The accusation lands like a stone in a still pond. Ripples, disbelief, the sound of breath catching in a dozen throats. But the girls are already at it, twitching, shrieking, gasping, pointing. They say Rebecca's spectre pricks them with pins, pinches their skin, whispers vile things when no one else is around. You follow her to the examination, your heart in your throat, expecting, hoping for reason to return. Surely this is the moment when everyone will snap out of it. But no, the judges stare her down. She answers gently but firmly. I am innocent as the child unborn, she says. You want to believe that matters. But the girls are crying louder now, flinging themselves to the floor, howling that she's hurting them with her mind. The courtroom tilts. Up is down. Guilt is innocence. And you realise, if Rebecca Nurse isn't safe, no one is. The crowd leaves the hearing silent, more shaken than usual. Even the judges look uneasy, like they've just bitten into something rotten and aren't sure if they can spit it out without choking. But it's too late to turn around. The witch hunt has momentum now, and nobody wants to be the one to hit the brakes. You pass a group of women at the well. They aren't whispering, they're watching. Every gesture, every stutter, every sideways glance. One of them drops her bucket, then stares at the woman next to her, like maybe that was caused by witchcraft. No one picks up the bucket. At the same time, you notice something else. The girls, the afflicted, are starting to become celebrities. They're invited to dinners, given special seats at services, treated like delicate vessels of divine warning. You see one of them, Anne Putnam, sitting smugly with a warm piece of pie while another woman is being arrested down the road. She looks up, sees you watching and smiles like it's all a game she's winning. And here comes another player, Bridget Bishop. She's trouble, always has been, wears red, runs a tavern, talks Barwick's back, once accused of bewitching her second husband. Not exactly Puritan poster material. She's an easy target, and the court is grateful for it. They need someone to make an example of, someone with sharp edges, someone the village won't mourn too loudly. You're there during her examination in early June. She stares them down, says they're fools, refuses to grovel. The afflicted girls, of course, go into full seizure mode, crying that she's biting them, burning them with invisible fire, summoning birds from thin air. Bridget calls it ridiculous. The judges call it enough. Here's your historical fact. Bridget Bishop became the first person executed during the Salem witch trials. She was hanged on June the 10th, 1692, after being found guilty by the newly formed Court of Oyer and Terminer, a special court established just to handle these increasing witchcraft cases. Now your fringe fact. During Bridget's trial, the girls claimed to see a small man in her shadow, a black man whispering to her, presumed to be the devil. Some even said her spectre ripped open their skin. Again, zero evidence, but all taken as truth. And the scholarly debate. Bridget Bishop's execution marks a turning point. Some argue she was chosen specifically to test public reaction. If the village protested, maybe the court would slow down, but they didn't. And so it continued. You're standing near the edge of the crowd when the execution happens. There's no ceremony, no trial by fire, just a rope, a tree, and silence. You can hear birds in the distance, not all of the devil's birds, just regular ones. That somehow makes it worse. Bridget doesn't scream, she doesn't cry. She says, "I am no witch," and then she drops. You don't realise you've been holding your breath until the body stops moving. Afterward, the crowd disperses like smoke, talking quietly, eyes low. No one says her name, just her or that woman. You want to scream, want someone to acknowledge the weight of what just happened, but all you get are sideways glances and shuffling feet. The machine is working as intended. More arrests follow. You see a pregnant woman led away in chains. Her husband begs the judges for mercy. They nod, understanding, then throw him in jail too. Children are orphaned. Homes stand empty. And still the girls scream, and still the judges listen, and still the devil remains conveniently invisible. One night you pass by the jail and hear music. Faint, almost like humming. A lullaby. Someone trying to keep their child from crying. It's quiet, almost tender. And then you hear the door slam shut again. In the morning you hear another name, then another, and all you can think is, who will they come for next? You wake before sunrise now, not out of choice, just survival. There's no sleeping in when the knock could come at any hour, when your name could leave someone's lips while you're still pulling on your stockings. You live half-dressed, ears sharp for hooves, for boots, for voices saying, "You're under arrest in the name of God and the law." Salem is a village of light sleepers and dry mouths. The courtroom today feels especially tight, the crowd more electric. Something's in the air, and it's not justice, it's theatre. The pews are packed, elbows jabbed against ribs, breath misting in the cold air as the accused are dragged in like sheep through mud. The girls, the afflicted, everyone calls them now, are already in place, clutching their necks, eyes darting, waiting for their cues. You spot Anne Putnam twitching her fingers, eyes wide. Mercy Lewis is already whimpering softly. Abigail Williams stares straight ahead like she's preparing for battle. And then the accused stands, and the surreal performance begins. Suddenly the girls shriek in unison. One of them collapses onto the floorboards, clutching her chest. Another says, "Her spectre's biting me!" and begins to bleed from the nose. A third claims to see a witch's bird flapping around the rafters. You glance up just in case. Nothing. Of course. The judges lean forward, not to question it, but to study it. They nod as if they're watching evidence unfold under a microscope. And this is where things get slippery. Because now, we're dealing with spectres. Spectral evidence. The invisible weapon of the courts. A person doesn't have to touch you, or curse you, or even speak your name. All that's needed is the claim that their ghost, or demon double, or whatever spectral version of themselves you want to call it, attacked you in your sleep or during prayers, or in the middle of market day. That's enough. You see a woman try to defend herself today. She pleads, says she's never even met the girl accusing her, that she doesn't own a single bird, and never could have made anyone's baby sick. The judges listen carefully. Then one of the girls gasps and points. "She's here now! Her spirit's biting my hand!" The girl holds up her arm, and sure enough there's a red mark. The courtroom leans in, gasps. You want to say, she bit herself. But you don't, because if you speak now the girls might point at you next. And everyone knows how that ends. Here's your historical fact. Spectral evidence was hotly debated even during the trials. Cotton Mather, a respected minister, urged the court to be cautious with it, warning that Satan could impersonate innocent people, but his father, Increase Mather, would only publicly denounce it after the worst had passed. Your quirky fringe fact. The infamous touch test was used during several examinations. Judges would bring in the accused and have them touch the afflicted girl mid-fit. If the girl immediately calmed, it was taken as proof of guilt, as if touch could neutralize a demonic trance. So yeah, real science-forward stuff. And the scholarly debate. Was the use of spectral evidence based in genuine theological belief, or was it a legal tool to fast-track accusations without needing real proof? Some historians say it was sincere, others argue it was just weaponized nonsense tailor-made for a legal system already drunk on fear. You start noticing patterns, not just in the accusations, but in who's making them. The Putnams, especially Thomas and Anne Sr., seem to have a lot of skin in this game. Every name they float coincidentally owns land near theirs, or has had a property dispute with them. You walk by the town records office one day and realise it's busier than the meeting house. Land claims are being redrawn while people swing from ropes. Still, the girls are the engine, and they're unstoppable. You pass Abigail in the street later. She's alone for once, chewing a piece of bread like nothing's happened. Her cheeks are pink, her hair tied with a ribbon that definitely wasn't there last month. She glances at you, half smirks, then keeps walking. You wonder what it feels like to hold that much power in your teeth. You hear stories now about how the afflicted behave outside the courtroom. One girl is said to fall into dramatic fits only when someone's watching. Another claims she was tormented by the spectre of a goat for hours, until she remembered goats can't talk. The absurdity is growing, but so is the body count. In the jail, you visit a woman who's been there for 3 weeks. She barely speaks anymore. Just keeps her eyes fixed on the window, as if she's trying to memorize the shape of light in case she never sees it again. You ask if she's afraid. She says no. "I know I'm innocent," she whispers, "but I'm afraid for what they'll say next." Because that's the scariest part. Not the judges, not the girls, not even the gallows. It's words. What someone says. A single sentence can seal your fate. "She looked at me wrong," her butter churns counterclockwise. "I saw her with a black cat." That's all it takes. You start watching your own tongue, checking every glance. You feel the words sitting behind your teeth like whetstones. Then a man is accused. Not just any man. George Burroughs, a former minister. His case shakes the village. Ministers aren't supposed to be witches, but the girls say he's the one leading the whole conspiracy, that he baptized them in rivers of blood, that he can read minds, that he lifts weights far too heavy for a normal man. Apparently demonic strength is a thing now. You want to laugh. But no one is laughing anymore. That's the thing. This isn't a fever dream. It's a structure now. A system. People get arrested, examined, jailed, hanged, and the more it happens, the more normal it feels. You walk home past the gallows. They're building a second platform, just in case. You don't even flinch when you hear screaming anymore. Anyway, it's just part of the village soundtrack now, right up there with dogs barking and carts rattling over frozen dirt. Today it comes from the meeting house again, where another woman is being put through the ringer. You can't remember her name, there have been too many lately, but you recognise the expression. It's the same one they all wear eventually. Disbelief marbled with fear, like they're not just fighting for their lives, but trying to figure out how everyone around them suddenly went insane. Today though, the courtroom is buzzing with something extra. A new test. You hear it before you see it. Someone talking about a cake. Not a celebration cake. A witch cake. Yeah, that's a real thing. You make your way to the front, elbowing past a man muttering psalms and a woman clutching her daughter as if proximity to innocence will keep her safe. The magistrates are talking to Reverend Parris's slave Tituba again, and another woman, Mary Sibley, who's got the same look as someone admitting she tried to fix her toothache with gunpowder. Apparently Sepus is someone took urine from one of the afflicted girls, mixed it with rye meal, baked it into a little cake and fed it to a dog. Why? Because the dog would react if witchcraft was at work. That's the logic. A possessed person's urine, baked into a biscuit, consumed by a canine. That's your cutting-edge diagnostic technique in 1692. Spoiler. The dog barked, which somehow did not lead to the conclusion that it was just a hungry dog. This is your justice system now. Here's your historical fact. The witch cake was a real folk remedy borrowed from English traditions. It was meant to expose witches through sympathetic magic. The fact that it was practiced in a community as strict as Salem is ironic, because using it was considered a cult. But desperation does strange things to rules. Your quirky fact, in addition to dogs, some villagers believe cats could reveal witchcraft too. One man claimed his neighbour's cat spoke to him in Latin, either witchcraft or the world's weirdest house pet. And the scholarly debate, did the witch cake incident spark an escalation in belief or simply reflect how deeply embedded folk magic still was in Puritan minds? Scholars argue whether these superstitions coexisted with the religious orthodoxy or actively undermined it. Either way, it's proof that people accusing witches were often dancing dangerously close to the very practices they condemned. You step back from the crowd and take a breath. The hypocrisy burns worse than the cold. These are people who won't let women wear coloured ribbons in their hair, but they're over here feeding enchanted snacks to livestock and calling it forensic evidence. Still it works. The cake points to more suspects, or at least it gives the afflicted girls another excuse to wail about burning insides and biting shadows. Whatever's afflicting them, it's got an endless appetite, and they're learning to feed it. The magistrates move on to the touch test, which sounds like it might involve actual logic, until you hear the rules. Basically, if a victim's fit stops the moment the accused touches them, that's proof the accused is guilty. You watch this unfold. A girl writhes and shrieks until a trembling old woman lays a hand on her. She goes quiet. Crowd gasps. Magistrate nods. And you think, I could pull that off. Anyone could. You could train a dog to do it. At this point, you begin to realise the only thing standing between someone and the noose is whether the crowd wants to believe them. It's not about facts. Not even about performance anymore. It's about narrative. The more dramatic the accusation, the more dangerous the witch. And the more dangerous the witch, the more righteous the town feels for rooting her out. The legal system has devolved into a spiritual improv game, where your ability to match energy and scream at the right moment can literally condemn or save a life. You leave the meeting house with your head buzzing. Outside, the world looks the same. Grey, brittle, unforgiving, but your mind can't stop spinning. You wonder how many people are sitting in their homes right now, terrified that some mistake they made 5 years ago will come back to hang them. Maybe they muttered something strange once. Maybe they gave someone the wrong look at the wrong time. Maybe they were just born with the kind of face that people don't trust. You hear someone behind you say the name Elizabeth Proctor, and your blood runs colder than the wind. Elizabeth, wife of Dumont, the one who already sits in jail. They're coming for her next. She's never done anything but run a quiet house and raise children. But that's not the point anymore. She's his wife, and he's already marked. You return to the jail later that day. It's louder than usual, crammed with more bodies. The air smells like wet wool and iron. You count 3 infants among the prisoners, one barely old enough to hold her own head up. Their mothers look like ghosts already. One woman begs for milk. Another sings under her breath, voice cracking with every note. You don't stay long. Word spreads. Mary Warren, one of the afflicted girls, is starting to second-guess things. You remember her? Always a little more hesitant. Slower to cry out. Now she's saying maybe the others are pretending, that maybe it's all gone too far, and for one split second you feel something like hope. But then the others turn on her. You watch as they surround her in court, accuse her of witchcraft. She breaks down immediately, recounts her confession, begs for forgiveness. The light goes out in her eyes, and just like that, she's back on their side, because survival means loyalty, and loyalty means screaming when they tell you to. So you close your eyes that night, trying not to think about cakes or cats or trembling girls pretending to choke on invisible hands. You try not to think about the gallows being built taller, or the guards bringing more nails. You try not to think about who will get pointed at next, but you do, every time. At first, it's just a feeling. A low hum under your skin that you can't quite shake, like static, like a splinter of unease you swallowed days ago and can't cough back up. The village isn't just scared anymore, it's changing shape. It's tightening, retracting. Windows close from faster. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Laughter is extinct. If someone does smile, it looks like a reflex they forgot how to control. And now, even the jail can't hold all the names being shouted across thresholds and courtrooms. You find yourself walking out toward the edge of town one morning, drawn by the sound of hammers echoing through the still air. There it is, the unfinished silhouette of a second jail. Technically, it's just a barn being repurposed, but everyone knows what it's for. No one says it aloud, but they know. The cells in Salem are already crammed with over 50 accused. You overheard someone joke darkly that if this keeps going, they'll just start hanging people in shifts. You can't help but notice the kinds of people being crammed into these makeshift cells. The sick, the elderly, the inconvenient, children. Entire families are being swept up. Husbands and wives arrested days apart. Infants tossed into cold straw beside their mothers. You heard about one baby dying already. Her mother still sits in a cell, barely speaking. That's not justice, it's a slow disaster. You visit the jail again later in the week and the air hits you like a slap. Damp, close, sour. There's not enough food, not enough straw, no bedding, no light. Just people packed together. Some chained, some not, all slowly unspooling. They pass time in silence or low murmurs. A few pray, most just wait. You notice one woman scratching tally marks into the stone wall with a broken button. There's a list now, not of accusations, those are endless. This list is something quieter, more insidious. Names of those who've confessed. These people live, for now. The confessions are long, desperate, and often contradictory, but the judges seem to love them. The more names, the more proof. They treat them like deposits in a bank account. The accused confessed to joining the devil, to signing his book, to flying on broomsticks, to attending midnight meetings with other witches deep in the forest. And once again, you catch the terrible rhythm. Those who deny are the ones who hang. But if you give them a name, any name, you get to stay. Here's your historical fact. Of the nearly 200 people accused during the Salem witch trials, many confessed only under immense pressure, or in hopes of saving themselves. Confessing didn't always guarantee freedom, but it did tend to delay execution. Most of those who were hanged refused to confess. Your fringe fact. One woman, Abigail Faulkner, was convicted of witchcraft but wasn't executed because she was pregnant. They delayed her hanging until after the birth, and by then the trials had begun to lose momentum. Her baby may have saved her life. And tonight's scholarly debate, were the confessions acts of strategic survival, or did some of the accused truly believe they were cursed or sinful enough to deserve punishment? Some researchers argue that religious guilt, trauma, or psychological breakdowns made people accept blame they didn't fully understand. Others say it was raw fear, nothing more. The court now uses these confessions to justify arresting more people. Each admission becomes a map, and they follow it wherever it leads, mostly to people with land, grudges, or poor social standing. They've gotten efficient. Arrest, examine, jail, repeat. If you squint, it almost looks like justice, but underneath it's a machine built on rot. You start to hear rumours about how the prisoners are faring, some falling ill, some dying quietly in the night. The cold is relentless. They're not given proper food, let alone warmth. One man, Peter Cloyce, sneaks food to his wife through a window before being arrested himself. He never had a chance. The courts don't like spouses who show too much loyalty. You notice fewer men walking freely around town now. The trial started with poor women, then widows, then inconvenient wives. But it's spreading. George Burroughs, the former minister, is still rotting in a cell accused of demonic strength and impossible feats. And now prominent landowners are being hauled in. John Proctor too. There's something twisted happening beneath the surface. Land grabs. When someone's arrested, their property becomes disputed territory. Suddenly, their neighbours, some of whom just happen to testify against them, are talking to magistrates about rights and boundaries. You realise the devil might not be the biggest opportunist in Salem, and yet the villagers still come to court every day, some out of duty, some for the spectacle, others because they're afraid not to be seen there. Attendance has become a performance too. You show up, you gasp at the right moments, and you make eye contact with the judges. It's a survival game disguised as piety. One morning, you're seated behind a woman named Susanna Martin. She's not young, not wealthy, and not interested in decorum. When asked if she's a witch, she says, "I defy the devil, and I scorn him." You brace yourself for the girl's response, and they do not disappoint. Collapsing, shrieking, babbling in tongues. Susanna rolls her eyes. It doesn't save her. You pass the gallows again later. The wood is dark with rain. There's a new rope, clean and unused, for now. You think about the people inside the jail, some of whom you've walked past in the market, nodded to in church, bought bread from not long ago. The same people who now sleep on stone and pray for a winter cold enough to kill them before the court does. The jail isn't just overflowing, logic is starving. It's not even that no one's fighting back. It's that no one knows how. There's no appeal, no court of reason, just a spinning wheel of fear, turned by girls, oiled by superstition, and blessed by the court's silence. And so you walk home in the dark, boots slipping on the wet leaves, wondering, if someone accused you tomorrow, how would you even begin to prove a negative? You wouldn't. That's the genius of it, and the horror. Reverend Hale rides into Salem with a Bible thicker than your forearm and a reputation to match. He's from Beverly, fancier than Salem, slightly less cursed, and he's been summoned as a witchcraft expert. Not that anyone's saying it quite like that. They call him learned, devout, a man of deep spiritual insight. But what they really mean is, he's got opinions, and that might be the most dangerous thing you can have here. You spot him from the edge of the meeting house crowd, tall, cloaked, all serious angles. He looks like he hasn't slept in days, and maybe that's by design. Men like Hale wear exhaustion as a badge of honour. He arrives just in time for another round of examinations, and the court wastes no time shoving accused bodies in front of him like offerings. "This one spoke Latin in her sleep," someone says. "This one's cow dried up after she walked past it." Hale listens. He nods. He jots notes in the margins of his massive book. You can almost see him trying to make it make sense. He wants the world to line up neatly. Good on one side, evil on the other, and a few righteous men in the middle holding the line. But Salem isn't going to give him that. Salem eats men like him for breakfast. You're there the day he visits the jail for the first time. He's expecting snarling, cursing, maybe sulphur. Instead, he finds women praying, men weeping, children sleeping on stone. You see something shift in his eyes. Not a full turn, just a crack. The first doubt. It slips in like a draft through a warped window frame. That night, Hale sits with the judges in a candlelit parlour. They argue over wine and scripture. He asks what evidence they've actually seen. Real evidence, not dreams and dogs. They bristle. He's not here to question. He's here to confirm. But Hale doesn't like being used. Not by the devil, and not by men who speak in the name of God while holding a rope behind their backs. Here's your historical fact. Reverend John Hale was a real minister who supported the trials early on, believing sincerely in the presence of witchcraft. But over time, especially after visiting prisoners and seeing the chaos unfold, he began to change his views. After the trials, he would publish a book admitting that the court had been misled. Your quirky fringe fact. Hale kept detailed notes not just on the accused, but on what they said in dreams, visions, and even what others dreamed about them. One man claimed he saw Hale in a vision speaking with flames behind him. That man would later retract the statement after being threatened with jail. Tonight's scholarly debate. How much did Hale truly change his mind during the trials, and how much of his later regret was post-crisis damage control? Some say his reversal was sincere, even courageous. Others think he simply realised too late that he'd hitched his wagon to a machine grinding innocent people into dust. But Hale's not ready to speak out yet. Not publicly. He's still caught in the fog, trying to reconcile scripture with screaming girls and a jail bursting at the seams. Meanwhile, things in town continue their nosedive. You attend the execution of Sarah Good. They march her up the hill in chains, her hair matted, her feet blistered. A minister walks beside her, reading from the Psalms. She ignores him. When they ask if she has anything to confess, she looks the judge square in the eye and says, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." You feel that in your spine, so does everyone else. You try to walk away, but the sound of the rope creaking follows you. The next day, Hale goes quiet. You hear he visited Sarah's cell before the hanging, that he prayed with her, that he asked, pleaded, for her to confess, if only to save herself. She refused, and now she's gone, and he's left holding the silence. Back in town, another accused woman, Dorcas Good, age 4, is led into court in tiny shackles. You watch her try to mimic the other girls, babbling about the devil pinching her. No one buys it, but no one stops it either. The jailers don't know what to do with her, so they throw her into a cellar. She cries for her mother at night, but her mother is already dead. You don't sleep much after that. Salem is starving, and not just for food. It's starving for logic, for mercy, for any version of justice that doesn't involve spectral birds and courtroom hysteria. But none of that's on the menu. You hear Hale talking to one of the judges after another long day of hearings. He asks, "Can't you see the devil's tricks maybe here, not in the accused, but in what we're doing?" The judge frowns, says something about due process and heavenly guidance. You watch Hale walk away, jaw clenched, lips pressed thin. You don't know if he's going to save anyone, but you can tell he wants to, and that's something. The gallows are busy again this week. You stop counting how many. There's a woman who sings as they tie the rope. There's a man who whispers a final prayer. There's a boy, 17, barely old enough to know what death even means. You walk home in the dark, boots soggy, cloak heavy with dew. You pass the meeting house, now lit at all hours. Trials go late these days. There's always someone new to examine, someone new to doubt, someone else to break. And somewhere behind the wood-panelled walls, you know Hale is still scribbling in his book, still trying to turn this all into something he can understand, but you already know the truth. There's no understanding this. There's only surviving it. There's a place in Salem now where the silence is louder than any scream. It's a field just outside the main village. Damp, uneven, scattered with rough stones. This is where they brought Giles Corey. Not to try him, not to examine him, not even to hang him. No, Giles gets something special, something older than trials and crueler than the gallows. He gets pressed. You walk out there early, before the crowd arrives. The sun hasn't fully climbed the sky yet, and the dew on the grass glistens like tiny graves. The air smells like damp earth and burnt anxiety. You see the cart first, wheels deep in the mud loaded with large, flat stones. They're not subtle about this. This is supposed to be a message. Giles is already lying in the pit, flat on his back, wrists tied, clothes torn. He's older than most of the accused, well into his 70s, but there's steel in his bones. He refused to speak in court, refused to plead guilty or innocent. That's the key. Without a plea, the court can't legally confiscate his land. If he dies untried, it passes to his sons, and so the court decides to press him, to literally crush the words from his chest. They place a board across him, then a stone, then another. The weight builds slowly, no rush. That's the point. They want time for him to change his mind. He doesn't. You stand back with the others, watching this slow-motion execution unfold with all the horror of a bad dream. There's no screaming, no last-minute confession. Just gritted teeth, blood in the mouth, and the sound of rock shifting. Every few hours the sheriff asks the same question. Will you enter a plea? And Giles, through blood and broken ribs, says the same thing every time. More weight. You flinch every time he says it. Not because he's angry. He's not. His voice is almost calm, defiant, yes, but calm, like someone who's already made peace with the worst parts of himself. Here's your historical fact. Giles Corey was the only person in American history to be pressed to death by order of a court. It happened on September 19th, 1692. He never entered a plea. His refusal protected his estate from seizure. Your quirky fringe fact. Legend says that just before he died, Giles cursed Sheriff George Corwin and all the sheriffs of Essex County. Strangely enough, several of Corwin's successors either died in office or were forced to resign due to health problems. The curse of Giles Corey became a long-standing local superstition, and the scholarly debate. Was Giles Corey resisting out of pride, or was he making a calculated sacrifice to preserve his family's property? Historians split on this. Some say he was stubborn to the end, never truly understanding the legal system. Others argue he knew exactly what he was doing and did it to protect his children. You stay longer than most. By the time the final stone is placed, the crowd has thinned. The sun has begun to fade and Giles is silent. They leave him there for a while just in case he speaks. He doesn't. Later the villagers return to their routines, if you can even call them that anymore. Someone's cart broke down near the Proctor farm. A cow wandered into the meeting house and stared at the pulpit like it had something to say. The sky is threatening rain. The crops are failing. Again. No one says Giles's name, but everyone feels it. like a bruise deep in the collective ribcage of the village. Some call him a fool, others call him brave, but all of them call him dead. In the jail, the news spreads fast. One prisoner weeps. Another mutters a prayer under her breath that sounds more like a curse. Someone tries to carve more weight into the stone wall with a broken spoon, but the letters don't come out clean. You wonder what Giles would have said if he had more time, if he could have watched what came next. Because things are speeding up. The court has become a churning wheel. The judges aren't just accepting accusations now, they're demanding them. The afflicted girls barely need prompting. They walk into court and start convulsing before the names are even read. One of them, Mac, claimed a spectre bit off her finger last week. Showed up with it wrapped in cloth. You watched her peel the fabric back for the court. No blood, no mark, just drama. The judges thanked her for her bravery. And then came George Burroughs. You remember him? The former minister. He's shackled now, face gaunt, eyes hollow. Oh, they say he performed impossible feats of strength. Lifted a musket with one hand, ran faster than a horse. That he baptised witches in the river and recited the Lord's Prayer backwards. That his spectre had been spotted in 20 different places, sometimes all at once. But here's the twist. When they hang him, he recites the Lord's Prayer perfectly, every word without stumbling. That's not supposed to be possible. Witches, by Puritan logic, can't say the Lord's Prayer. It's one of their telltale flaws. But George says it anyway, loud, clear, with a rope around his neck. You watch people shift uncomfortably. A few in the crowd exchange looks. Someone mutters that the devil must have taught him to fake it, and just like that, the moment passes. They hang him anyway. You return home that night bone-weary, not from walking, not from watching, from holding it all inside. There's no safe place to speak the truth now, not in court, not in church, maybe not even in your own house, and so the truth sits in your chest like a rock. More weight. The wind hits sharper today, rolling in off the hills like it's trying to peel your skin off in layers, but that doesn't stop the crowd from gathering. They come wrapped in cloaks and silence, boots crunching over frost and dead grass, eyes low, hands buried in pockets. There's a rhythm to this now, like market day, only darker. Today, they're walking to the hanging tree. It's not a real tree, not anymore. Gallows Hill has been dressed up for its job. A set of beams, heavy rope, and the kind of silence that swallows whole towns. Today 5 people are scheduled to die. You stand near the edge of the hill, and you can already see the condemned walking up the path, flanked by guards and ministers. They don't fight. No one fights anymore. Not because they believe the system works, but because they know it doesn't. You spot Martha Corey among them. Her face is pale, but not afraid. She holds her head high even as the noose swings gently in the breeze beside her. She tried to speak out. Tried to call the trials madness. That's what sealed her fate. And now here she is, walking toward the rope with dignity wrapped tighter around her than her shawl. Next is Mary Easty, sister to Rebecca Nurse, who was already hanged weeks ago. Mary's arrest felt especially cruel, coming just days after she'd been released. Her reprieve had offered the village a flash of hope. Maybe things were slowing down. Maybe someone had come to their senses. But no. The girls cried out again, the court reversed course, and she was marched right back to jail. Now she's climbing the gallows. The minister offers her a final prayer. She thanks him politely, then speaks herself. Clear, steady, not even a tremble. I am clear of this sin, she says. I pray that none of you condemn the innocent again. It's almost too much to hear. The rest, Ann Pudieta, Alice Parker and Wilmot Red, each offer their own words, though the wind snatches most of them away before you can catch them. It's not about what they say anymore. The crowd doesn't come to listen. They come to watch, and then, just like that, it happens. 5 ropes, 5 bodies, 5 creaks in the wind. The silence afterward is worse than the act itself. You can hear a woman near you whispering, "They're with God now," but even she doesn't sound convinced. Here's your historical fact. On September 22nd, 1692, the final 8 executions of the Salem witch trials were carried out at Gallows Hill. 19 people were hanged in total, and one, Giles Corey, was pressed to death. It marked the deadliest day of the trials. Here's your fringe fact. According to one onlooker, as the bodies swung from the gallows that day, a black dog appeared out of nowhere and barked at the condemned. Some said it was the devil himself come to claim his own. Others said it was just a dog. Either way, it vanished before anyone could catch it. And tonight's scholarly debate. Why did the hangings condole? even when public doubt had begun to grow? Was it fear of admitting error? Pride among the magistrates? Or had the momentum become too strong for anyone to stop without being accused themselves? Historians still argue where the tipping point really was, and whether it came too late to matter. After the executions, you walk back through the village. Everything feels quieter, not out of reverence, more like fatigue. Like the town itself is tired of pretending this all makes sense. You pass the meeting house, doors closed, candles still flickering inside. There's a sermon happening. Of course there is. Sin doesn't rest. But outside, people are changing. You see it in the way they avoid eye contact, in how quickly they return home, in the nervous glances toward the woods, as if they expect the devil to come marching in and ask what all the fuss was about. At the jail, the ones left behind begin to understand. If you haven't confessed by now, you probably won't. Which means you probably won't leave. A few hold out hope, most don't. One woman scribbles her confession onto the wall with a piece of charcoal, even though she knows no one will come to collect it. Another begins naming names, people already dead. It doesn't matter. She's hoping it will earn her another day, another bowl of soup, a cleaner blanket. You overhear the guards joking that they need more rope. You don't laugh. What strikes you most is how normalised it all feels. There are vendors along the main road now selling bread and cloth during executions. One man tried selling tiny dolls of the afflicted girls before being told bluntly that even Salem had limits. Still, the idea lingered. Even the children are playing witch trial now, accusing each other in sing-song voices, pretending to fall into fits, screaming names into the air before collapsing in laughter. You see a girl pretend to be hanged with a scarf tied around a tree branch. Her mother doesn't even blink. That night you sit in your room, shutters drawn tight, listening to the wind scrape against the glass like a warning. You keep the candle burning even though the oil is low. The shadows make you uneasy, not because you believe in ghosts, but because you believe in people. And right now, people are the scariest thing in Salem. There's a letter under your pillow. You haven't opened it yet. Someone slipped it to you at the edge of the crowd, just a few lines, scrawled in haste. It reads, "They're coming for me next. Don't trust the silence, it's only the sound of people waiting their turn." You fold the letter and slide it into your boot. You don't know who wrote it, but you believe them, and as the night deepens and the wind whistles through the chimneys, you lie still in your bed, listening for the next knock at the door, because there's always another. You wake to bird song, which feels offensive. The kind of bright, cheerful chirping that doesn't belong in a village where people are being hanged for imaginary crimes. The sun's out too, brash, gold, indifferent. The streets are quiet, but not in the heavy way of mourning. This is a different kind of silence. A silence that hovers after something terrible has happened, and everyone's pretending it hasn't. You walk through the centre of town and hear laughter. Not much, just a snort. A short burst from two boys kicking stones near the blacksmiths. It catches you off guard. The world is trying to spin again, but it's wobbling. This morning's court session promises something a little different. Today's accused is no easy target. No poor woman, no slave, no midwife or outspoken farmer's wife. Today they're going after a woman who knows exactly how the game works, and who's never followed rules in her life. Her name is Dorcas Hoare, widow, herbalist. Known around town for her wild hair, sharp tongue, and refusal to mind her own business. She's already been accused once, maybe twice, but it's only now that they've decided to go full trial. You remember hearing someone say she predicted a thunderstorm once and then stood on her porch while the lightning cracked overhead. That was enough to keep most people wary. In court, Dorcas doesn't cry, doesn't beg. She sits straight-backed, eyes like steel, hair a mess that makes her look a little too much like the folk tales say a witch should. She knows what she looks like, and she's not apologising for it. The afflicted girls are ready. They perform like seasoned actresses now. One shrieks that Dorcas is ripping at her soul. Another claims she's being strangled by Dorcas's shadow. They drop to the floor, flail, gasp for air. It's gotten absurd, but no one in power blinks. Then something odd happens. Dorcas laughs. It's soft, quick, but unmistakable. A kind of low chuckle that sends a ripple through the courtroom. The kind of sound that says, "Is this really what we're doing?" You can almost hear the room hold its breath. One of the magistrates turns red. Another clears his throat. The girls freeze for a moment, then begin convulsing harder, because how else do you overpower a laugh? Dorcas doesn't stop smiling. You don't know if she's being brave or foolish or both, but it's the first time in days anyone's looked the madness in the eye and dared to mock it. Here's your historical fact. Dorcas Hoare was one of the last people convicted during the Salem witch trials. Unlike many others, she was granted a temporary reprieve, possibly due to a confession she made at the last moment. It gave her just enough time for the tide to turn. And your quirky fringe fact, her wild, waist-length hair became a point of fascination. Some believed it held magical power, especially since she refused to cut it, even in jail. Local superstition held that witches drew strength from their hair, an echo of old European folklore that never quite died. And for tonight's scholarly debate, did Dorcas confess out of fear, or was she playing the system to survive? Her last-minute admission, paired with the court's growing unease, suggests a calculated move. Some historians argue she was a master manipulator, others say she cracked under pressure. Either way, she lived, and in this town that counts as a miracle. Back in the streets, things are getting weirder. Someone spotted a woman balancing stones on her porch and immediately called for a magistrate. Another man was accused because his dog looked at someone wrong. The legal bar is buried underground now, and the girls, they're starting to contradict themselves. Last week, they claimed a woman's spirit flew in through a closed window. This week, they said she dug her way up from the ground. Same woman, two different ghost stories, but again, no one blinks. You pass a group of men outside the tavern arguing about whether the devil has a regional accent. One swears he heard a demon whisper in French. Another insists the devil's familiar wears English shoes. It would be funny if people weren't dying over it. You head toward the old burying ground at dusk, half on accident. It's quiet there, cold. The wind slips between gravestones like a rumour. You walk past new markers, wooden, crude, no names, just dates. And you realise how fast the executions have been, how neatly they've erased the condemned. Then you see a stone with a name carved in jagged letters. Nurse. Someone scratched the word innocent beneath it. Another hand has scratched it out. When you leave the graveyard, the sky's gone lavender and gold, and there, near the edge of the trees, you swear you see something. Not a ghost. Physics. Two girls practicing a fall. One throws herself to the ground with a cry. The other leans over her, whispers something, giggles. They reset. Try again. It's all rehearsal. You turn back to town with a sick feeling settling in your stomach. It's not the devil playing tricks in Salem. It's something worse. Performance. And worse still, audience approval. Tomorrow the court will meet again. More accusations, more trials, more breathless visions of evil spectres doing unspeakable things to people who are just trying to sell eggs or tend a sick child or disagree with a neighbour. But for now, the sky burns with dying light. The gallows are quiet. The jail sleeps behind its stone walls, and Dorcas Hoare sits in her cell, brushing her tangled hair with a piece of bone, waiting for the court to decide what kind of story they want her to be. Witch? Survivor? Footnote? She's not in a rush. And neither is the devil. You wake with a strange craving for bread. Not the normal kind, something darker, denser, earthy. It hits you out of nowhere, and for a second you wonder if this is how the afflicted girls feel when they claim they're being possessed. But your craving is more literal. You want to chew something, to sink your teeth into something real. Because the village, Salem, nothing feels real anymore. And today, you're about to hear one of the weirdest theories yet. Something so absurd, so far-fetched, it somehow makes more sense than anything else. You walk to the edge of town where a small group has gathered. No judges this time, no accusations or courtroom theatrics. Just a few townsfolk standing in the shade of a barn, whispering like they're cooking up a secret. And they are. A travelling scholar has arrived, not from Salem, not even from Boston, from somewhere beyond with a thick coat and eyes like he's seen too much. He doesn't talk like the others. He talks like a man who's spent years in books and candlelight and arguments with no one but himself, and now he's here to explain everything. He says it wasn't witches, not the devil, not spectral evidence, no curses, no pacts signed in blood or ghost birds pecking girls' foreheads. He says it was the bread, specifically the rye. Everyone stares. The man launches into a strange explanation. Apparently in wet seasons, like the one Salem had just before the outbreak, a fungus called claviceps purpurea can grow on rye grain. If it's harvested and baked into bread, people who eat it might suffer hallucinations, convulsions, irrational fear, even temporary psychosis. He calls it ergotism, and you can tell most of the people around you aren't quite sure whether he's a genius or a lunatic. But he has charts, drawings, case studies from Europe, villages that went mad for weeks, dancing in the streets, claiming visions, burning witches who weren't witches at all, just unlucky enough to eat the wrong toast. You glance back toward town, towards the jail, toward the courthouse where, as he speaks, another woman is likely being accused of flying through someone's bedroom window in a ghostly shape. Could it really have been mouldy bread? Here's your historical fact. In number 76, a behavioural scientist named Linda Caparael proposed that ergot-contaminated rye could explain the symptoms of the Salem afflicted. The theory made waves and was published in Science, sparking a new kind of conversation around the trials. Here's your fringe fact. In medieval Europe, outbreaks of ergot poisoning were sometimes called St. Anthony's Fire. Entire towns would erupt into madness, dancing, screaming, seeing visions, and often blamed it on divine punishment or sorcery. Sound familiar? And tonight's scholarly debate, is the ergot theory credible or just an imaginative shot in the dark? Historians remain divided. Some say the symptoms line up too well to ignore. Others argue the theory is too neat, conveniently physicalizing what may have been purely social, psychological, or political hysteria. You don't know where you fall. It's seductive, this idea of science saving us from our past, blaming chemistry instead of people. But part of you wonders if that's just another way to dodge accountability. Because even if the girls were hallucinating, someone still put a noose around a mother's neck. Someone still crushed a man beneath stones. Mouldy bread doesn't explain that. Still, it sticks with you. All day you can't stop imagining the moment it began, a single loaf of bread, a bite, a twitch, a fever dream, then a scream, and then the whole thing unspooling from that one small, ordinary moment, something meant to nourish turning into something deadly. Back in the village, no one's talking about rye. They're too busy with the next round of accusations. This week, it's Deliverance Hobbs and her daughter Abigail. They're new to town, transplants from Maine, where raids and frontier violence have left entire communities shattered. They don't fit in. And that's all it takes. Deliverance sits in court, hands folded, face tired. She's seen worse. The frontier hardened her. Her daughter stares blankly at the floor, answering questions with a flat yes or no. The girls perform their routine. Fits, howls, invisible bruises. But it feels hollow today, as if even they are starting to get bored. Still, the judges press on. Evidence, after all, is piling up, or so they claim. You catch sight of something new in the corner, a doll, small, handmade, stuck with a pin. Someone claims they found it in Deliverance's house. A poppet. Witchcraft. It's the 1692 version of a smoking gun, except it looks like something a child made for fun. They hold it up like it's a loaded weapon. Deliverance doesn't even blink. Later, you overhear a neighbour asking if the devil can use cats now. Apparently someone's pet hissed at the minister during morning prayers. Another neighbour has started sleeping in shifts, too afraid to close both eyes. The dream accusations have reached a fever pitch. People claim to be attacked in their sleep, not just by spectres, but by actual fire. One woman says her nightgown caught a blaze in a vision. Her husband confirms it. They both swear they saw it. You watch them, you see their faces. They believe it. So maybe it wasn't the bread. Maybe it's the need to believe, the need to blame. By nightfall, you're back in your bed, listening to the wind scrape past the corners of your house like something hunting. You think about all the explanations: ergo, mass hysteria, teenage theatre, religious obsession, political scheming, personal revenge, pick any two, combine them. It still doesn't make it right, but it makes it human. And that's the worst part. The devil didn't need to show up in Salem. He never had to. The people did his work for him. All they needed was a little fear. And maybe, just maybe, a slice of poisoned bread. You can hear it now in the pauses between sentences, when the magistrates pause too long before speaking, when the girls hesitate a second too late before the next fit, when the crowd mumbles instead of murmurs. Doubt. It's small, brittle, easily crushed, but it's there. And in Salem, where everything has been certainty and fire and blind belief for months, doubt is a dangerous, miraculous thing. This morning you find yourself at the Putnam house. Not by invitation, you're just passing by, really. But the air around it has thickened. Their barn sits quiet, a single chicken pecking at nothing in the dirt. And inside the house, something colder than a draft hangs over the doorway. You don't go in, you just listen. The Putnams are at the centre of this mess, and they know it. Thomas Putnam, tall and brooding, has written more complaints than anyone in the village. His name is on half the warrants. His wife Anne has raised an afflicted daughter and whispered venom into enough ears to bring down saints. It doesn't take a genius to notice that many of the people they accuse just happen to own land near theirs. Or worse, disagree with them. Land is the secret devil here. You've seen the maps, the boundary lines redrawn as neighbours disappear. It's no coincidence. The dead don't argue about fences. Today, one of the accused is a man named John Willard, former constable. Worked for the court once, helped arrest witches, but he started asking questions, said the girls were pretending, said innocent people were dying. So of course, the girls screamed his name next. You're there as he's marched to the meeting house. His face is pale, but it's not fear, it's fury. He turns to the judge and says, "If you hang me now, God will know his own." Then he turns to the crowd. "You know I'm no witch, but I know who you are. All of you." And for a moment, just a moment, no one says a word. But moments don't last in Salem. The girls scream. Anne Putnam throws herself to the ground, claiming Willard's ghost is dragging her toward hell. Her father yells something about divine justice. The magistrates bang their fists on the table. The storm starts again. Here's your historical fact. John Willard was indeed accused after he began voicing skepticism about the trials. He had refused to arrest people he believed were innocent, and was himself hanged on August 19, 1692. His death sent ripples through the village, especially because of his once loyal position in the system. Your fringe fact tonight. At Willard's execution, his body reportedly took longer than usual to die. Some said he kicked for too long. Others whispered it was the devil trying to keep him alive. A few brave souls said it was just rope tied poorly, but in Salem everything becomes a sermon. And your scholarly debate, how much of the Salem panic was driven by economic motives? Some historians argue land disputes, family feuds and political rivalries played a larger role than religion or fear. Others believe personal greed was just fuel for a fire already burning out of control. You lean toward the first camp, because the more you listen, the more you hear the same names echo again and again in every testimony, every whispered rumour, every false vision. The Putnams, the Porters, the nurses, the proctors. It's like watching a play where the characters keep changing costumes, but the actors never leave the stage. You start hearing talk of resentment. Quiet, careful, but it's there. That child's too proud, someone says of Anne Putnam. That Abigail's eyes are too dry when she cries, says another. There's a merchant in town who refuses to attend the trials now. Says he's done watching children decide who lives and dies. You think about speaking up. Just once. Just loud enough to be heard. But then you remember what happened to Mary Parker. All she did was sigh in court, one tired, weary breath. And Abigail Williams fell into a fit so violent that half the jury screamed. Mary never got to speak again. Amen. So you stay quiet. You visit the jail again, and it's somehow worse. One cell flooded during the last night's storm. The straw's soaked. The women are soaked. They're coughing now, deep rattling coughs that won't sound like they'll go away. One guard complains about the smell. Another jokes they'll all hang before they need doctors. In the farthest corner, you see John Proctor, still alive, still watching. He doesn't say much, just sits with his head bowed, fingers laced together, breathing through his teeth. His wife Elizabeth is still imprisoned, still awaiting her own trial. She's pregnant, so they'll wait. Let her give birth, then kill her. Merciful, they call it. You see Proctor's knuckles go white. Outside, you hear that the judges are starting to feel pressure. Not from inside Salem, those people are still too scared, but from Boston, from ministers and scholars who are asking questions, from men who think maybe letting children pick the condemned wasn't the best idea after all. But the court is digging in. That's how power works. Once you've hanged one innocent person, admitting fault means you murdered them. Admitting fault means you're the one who deserves judgment. So instead, they double down. The next day, they execute 5 more. Willard, Parker, Martha Carrier, accused of being the Queen of Hell, and 2 others. No one weeps publicly anymore. It's become something between routine and ritual. You stand at the back of the crowd. You watch the rope pull tight. You watch the feet go still. You watch the magistrates whisper to each other like it's business as usual. And then you hear something that turns your blood to ice. It's a girl's voice behind you. Young, familiar. She's whispering to a friend. I wonder who's next. Not in fear, in curiosity. And that's when you realise, this won't end when the devil leaves. You notice it slowly at first, like the distant hum of something about to fall apart. It starts in the way people look at their daughters, carefully, uncertainly, like they're trying to remember when that child last accused someone. It's there in the pinched faces of the magistrates, who now squint harder than they used to, as if that alone will make the lies sound more like truth. And it's loudest in the names now surfacing, because the girls have started pointing fingers at the impossible. Respectable women, rich women, churchgoers, men of good standing. The kind of people you weren't supposed to touch. That's when you feel the fabric really start to fray. Today they accuse Lady Mary, wife of a prominent merchant, always dressed in clean linens, always kind to children, even the feral ones who throw rocks at shutters. You remember her giving food to prisoners. She was polite, elegant, untouchable, until now. You're there when they bring her to court. Her gloves are still on. She stands calmly in front of the magistrates, her posture perfect. The girls begin their dance, wailing, collapsing, one of them screaming that Lady Mary's spectre pushed her off a roof last night. The girl's mother nods along, wide-eyed, as if her child jumping on the bed is now diabolical evidence. But Mary does something unexpected. She laughs, not nervously, not cruelly. She laughs because it's ridiculous. And it is, everything about it. You've watched grown men nod gravely as children claim to be throttled by invisible cats. You've seen judges order hangings over dreams and dolls. But this moment, this woman refusing to play along, it lands like thunder. The court doesn't know what to do. The magistrates shuffle their papers, glance at each other. One tries to scold her. Do you not fear the judgment of God? She raises an eyebrow. I fear your lack of it. It's not a defence, it's a challenge, and you feel something shift. Here's your historical fact. As the trials dragged on and more people of high social standing, wealthier, more connected, were accused, the mounting pressure on the judicial system began to cause cracks. While many still suffered, the widening scope of accusations triggered growing unease among the elite, who now realised they were not immune. Your fringe fact. At one point, the girls accused the wife of the governor of Massachusetts, Lady Phipps, of witchcraft. The accusation was quickly swept under the rug, but it revealed how far the hysteria had spun, and how close it was to toppling its own creators. Tonight's scholarly debate. Some historians argue that the witch trials began as a way to control women, especially those who were too independent, too loud, too different. Others argue that once the power dynamic shifted, the accusation stopped being about gender and started being about fear's insatiable appetite. Both might be true. You've seen enough to believe either. Back in town, something else is becoming clear. This isn't just a war on witches, it's a war on women. Look at the numbers. The accused, the hanged, the imprisoned, almost all the women. And not just any women, but women who spoke up. Women who owned land, women who didn't fit. Widow, healer, midwife, opinion haver, each one a potential threat to a fragile structure built on obedience. You walk past the jail and hear them. Dozens of women in cages, many of them mothers. Daughters, wives, sisters, and no one's sewing now, no one's raising bread or mending clothes. The work of the village has slowed. You feel it. The men are busy testifying, the women are locked up. Even the girls, the afflicted, darted with little power. But now you watch them held aloft, fed, protected. They are no longer just accusing, they're shaping the village with their stories. And those stories always end with someone's mother swinging from a rope. You pass Mercy Lewis in the street. She's wearing a new bonnet. She doesn't recognise you. Or maybe she does and chooses not to. She walks like someone who owns the world, like someone who could burn it down if she blinked too hard. Later, you overhear a group of women talking quietly near the river. One says she won't leave her house anymore. Another says her sister's been accused just for refusing a marriage proposal. A third has hidden her sewing needles for fear they'll be mistaken for witch tools. And then one says, this isn't about witches anymore. You don't say a word, because she's right. It's not about magic or Satan or curses. It's about control, about who gets to speak, about who gets to live. You think about Anne Hutchinson, banished from Boston decades earlier for daring to preach as a woman. You think about how that lesson echoes in every stone wall of Salem. Women in power must be punished. Women with voices must be verhunzt. The devil's just a convenient costume. In court, you watch as more women are brought forward, and more men say they saw things, heard things. One man claims his wife's ghost visited him in the night and tried to smother him with her hair. Everyone gasps, no one laughs. A new confession is read. The accused woman admits, under pressure of course, that she danced with Satan and swore loyalty. She was tempted by the promise of freedom, of respect, of being heard. Even the devil in this warped narrative offers more agency than Salem. You think about that all night, about how freedom, even false freedom, might be enough to make someone confess, might be enough to make them wish it were true. You hear whispers of resistance, few men petitioning for clemency, a letter being drafted to Boston, a small fire beginning in the minds of people who, just weeks ago, lit torches to burn their neighbours. But for now, the court still stands, the rope is still strong, and the gallows are still used. Another woman will hang tomorrow. You already forgot her name, that's the worst part. It's raining again, a slow, slanted drizzle that soaks your cloak and runs down the back of your neck in the cold rivulets, as if the sky itself is trying to remind Salem what shame feels like. But rain doesn't cleanse. Not this kind. This rain just makes everything stink. Damp straw, rotten wood, the coppery tang of rust on the jail bars, or maybe it's not rust. You trudge through the muddy path to the meeting house where the ministers are gathering again, sharpening their words like good knives. One name buzzes in the air louder than most today, Cotton Mather. You've heard of him before. Everyone has. He's not a Salem man, he's Boston royalty. The son of Increase Mather, a heavyweight among Puritan ministers, Cotton's a rising star in the church. Young, loud, opinionated, and possibly allergic to being wrong. He hasn't come to Salem in person, he's too busy writing books, but his letters are passed around like gospel. He sends guidance to the judges, advice, long-winded prose that basically boils down to proceed with caution, but keep proceeding. He tells them not to lean too hard on spectral evidence, and yet he also praises them for their zeal. Like a man warning you not to overeat while handing you cake. You find yourself wondering what he'd do if he were here in person. Would he cry at the gallows? Would he pause when the wind blows a child's bonnet across the field where her mother was hanged? Or would he take notes? Here's your historical fact. Cotton Mather was a major religious and intellectual figure in New England. He publicly supported the Salem court's mission, but urged restraint in the use of spectral evidence. He later attempted to distance himself from the bloodshed, but his writings from the time were used as justification for many of the court's decisions. Your quirky fringe fact: Mather was obsessed with documenting wonders of the invisible world. He believed in witches, demons, and divine interventions, and he once claimed that strange weather patterns, such as comets or earthquakes, were signs of spiritual warfare. The devil, he insisted, was not only real but organising, and the scholarly debate. Was Cotton Mather a cautious voice drowned out by hysteria, or a cunning opportunist hedging his bets? Some historians believe he tried to slow the madness, but lacked the courage to stop it. Others think he fueled it with his lofty sermons and then tried to rewrite his legacy once the bodies started stacking up. You lean toward the latter. Today's trial feels different. There's tension, a sense that not everyone's quite sure they're on the right side anymore. You spot Judge Stoughton, head tilted slightly, watching the girls with something that almost resembles skepticism. Almost. But then Abigail lets out a scream so piercing it could cut glass, and the courtroom snaps back into action like a marionette with its strings yanked. They're trying Elizabeth Howe today. You've seen her before, thin, serious, but never cruel. She once paid off the neighbour's debt after his cow got loose and broke a fence. That man is now one of her accusers. She betrayed no emotion as he testified, just clenched her jaw and folded her hands. But the girls say she floats. They say her ghost visits them in dreams. They say she stood at the foot of their beds and whispered secrets she couldn't possibly know. One says Elizabeth's spirit slapped her so hard that her soul nearly left her body. You want to scream? Instead, you watch. They find her guilty. Of course they do. And then a few more. In the town square, someone is selling pamphlets with sketches of witches. Pointy hats, gnarled fingers, crooked noses. You buy one out of morbid curiosity and immediately regret it. These aren't witches. They're just women with opinions. You walk past a tavern later and hear men arguing quietly. One of them says his cousin was named yesterday. He doesn't believe it. He says she was always a bit odd, sure, but not evil. Another man says, "We've hanged Odder," and drinks his ale. Back at the jail, you see a man visiting his wife. Through the bars, she tells him to remarry, to make sure their children have bread. He weeps. She doesn't. You wonder which of them is stronger. Inside the meeting house that night, the ministers are still debating doctrine. You listen to one sermon, and it's full of fire and brimstone and thundering vengeance, but you can tell the wind is changing. People are shifting in their seats now, looking around, wondering who might be next, because it's not just witches anymore, it's gossip, dissent, questioning, doubt, and those things are harder to hang. Cottonmather's latest letter is read aloud. It is once again a long rope of words wrapped around nothing. He praises the court for its vigilance and devotion to truth. Then halfway down the page, a single line. Better that 10 suspected witches should escape than one innocent person be condemned. It hangs in the air like smoke. Too late. The next morning you wake to the sound of carpenters hammering again. A new scaffold, taller than the last. Another batch of names posted. Another round of jailings. And still, Cotton Mather stays in Boston, writing from his study, safe from the rain, far from the gallows, dipping his pen in ink while Salem dips its hands in blood. You wonder if he'll quote himself in the next sermon. You don't hear it at first, not over the wind or the hush of early autumn leaves scraping the ground, but it's there, something different. A carriage, hooves, wheels, and the measured stomp of authority. You follow the sound through the grey morning light, and there, in a coat too clean for this town and boots that haven't tasted Salem mud, steps the man who may finally stop this madness. Governor William Phipps. He wasn't supposed to come. Governors don't just walk into the middle of hysteria. They stay removed, regal, above the noise. But something's changed. Maybe it was the letter from Boston ministers. Maybe it was the growing discomfort among his own men. Or maybe it was the final straw when someone dared accuse his own wife of witchcraft. Yes, you heard that right. The governor's wife. Funny how justice moves faster when power feels threatened. You trail the small crowd gathering around his arrival. No one knows whether to bow or ask for mercy. Most people just stare. He's not grand exactly, but he has the kind of posture that says, I've seen battles, and I'm not here to play games with girls screaming about birds. He doesn't visit the jail, doesn't sit in on court, not right away. But within hours of arriving, he makes one swift, clean move. He dissolves the court of Oyer and Termina, the special court created just for these trials, just like that. A flicker of authority, a slice through the tangled roots of this entire mess. No more trials, no more hangings, at least not for now. Here's your historical fact. Governor Phipps officially disbanded the Court of Oyer and Termina in October 1692, putting an end to the most aggressive phase of the Salem witch trials. He later established a new court, one that did not permit spectral evidence, and most of the remaining accused were acquitted or released. Your quirky fringe fact. Phipps was reportedly reluctant to get involved at first. But once his wife, Mary Spencer Hull Phipps, was named, his tone shifted fast. Whether he believed in the witchcraft panic or not, he knew when it was knocking on his front door. Tonight's scholarly debate. Was Phipps motivated by principle or politics? Some argue he was genuinely appalled by the chaos. Others think he was simply protecting his own status and family reputation. The truth, like most things in Salem, probably lives in the grey. You walk through the town that evening and feel something unfamiliar. Relief. Not joy, not celebration, just a lifting. Like someone cracked a window after months of smoke. You pass families reading the governor's proclamation aloud by candlelight. You see women holding hands, trembling not because of fear, but because they didn't expect to live. But not everyone is pleased. You overhear Judge Stoughton complaining to another official, furious that the court was halted. He defends the convictions. He insists the devil's work hasn't been finished. That mercy is weakness. That those already executed were rightfully condemned. You look at him and wonder how many more he'd have killed if no one stopped him. The girls aren't sure how to respond either. You see Abigail Williams 2 days later walking with a friend. No theatrics, no fits, just 2 teenage girls giggling about something you can't hear. One drops a ribbon, the other picks it up. The normalcy feels wrong somehow, like they've shed the whole persona like a snake skin and gone back to being harmless children. Except you remember the rope. And you can't forget, in the weeks that follow, the prisoners wait. They're not freed immediately. The new court takes time to assemble. Trials are delayed, re-evaluated, reheard. But now there are rules. Evidence must be real. Hearsay and ghost stories are out. The afflicted girls aren't even allowed in the room for some of them. And suddenly verdicts change. Rebecca Nurse, previously hanged, would have been found innocent under the new court. That's what the records say. That knowledge sits like a stone in the town's gut. Some of the other convicted are quietly exonerated. Others are set free for lack of evidence. Those who confessed are left in limbo, alive, but with their names smudged forever. You visit the jail when the first release happens. The door creaks open, and a woman steps out blinking at the sun. She looks thinner, older, her clothes falling off her like she doesn't quite fit inside herself anymore. She doesn't smile. No one does. It's not that kind of moment. She just breathes. Deep. Once. And then walks home. There are no parades, no apologies, no monuments. The gallows remain. The rope has been removed, but the beam still stands. They call it the place, not wanting to give it a proper name. The town gets quieter. Quieter in a new way. A cautious, haunted quiet. Everyone lost someone. A mother, a sister, a friend, a reputation. And those losses are not discussed at dinner. They're folded up and tucked away behind neat curtains, behind mouths that won't speak their names. You catch a glimpse of John Proctor before he's released. He stares at the floor, face unreadable. His wife, Elizabeth de Biebith, is still imprisoned, still waiting to give birth. When she does, the baby is healthy. They name her Sarah. That name shows up again and again in Salem. You wonder what kind of world she'll grow up in. You overhear Cotton Mather's name once more. He's publishing a book. Of course he is. Wonders of the Invisible World, it's called. A defence of the trials, of the court, of himself. He claims he tried to be careful, tried to temper justice with mercy. But the ink on that page feels an awful lot like deflection. Or guilt, papered over in scripture. Meanwhile, Governor Phipps returns to Boston quieter than when he arrived. He does not write a book. You suspect he doesn't sleep well either. You wake up one morning and realise there have been no new accusations in weeks. The girls aren't convulsing. No one's seen a yellow bird. The devil apparently has left town, or maybe he's just satisfied, because there's nothing left to ruin. It's strange how apologies sound in Salem, like shoes dragging across a wooden floor, like dry leaves brushed into a pile but never burned. They don't come fast, they don't come loud. They come years later, slow and awkward, muttered through tight lips by people who once shouted accusations with perfect clarity. But they do come, eventually. The first public apology arrives from a surprising place. You're sitting at the edge of a church pew one Sunday when Reverend Samuel Parris climbs into the pulpit looking more ghost than man. His hair is thinner, his eyes are hollower. He doesn't hold his Bible like a sword anymore, more like a burden. The congregation is quieter than usual, not reverent, uncomfortable. He clears his throat, fumbles for words. He says the trials were misguided, that he regrets errors in judgment, that perhaps the devil's greatest trick was not bewitching the accused, but confusing the righteous. He stops short of naming names. He doesn't mention Tituba, or his niece Abigail, or his daughter Betty, who, by the way, has long since disappeared to live with relatives in another town. But you know what he means. Everyone does. You glance around the room and see the townspeople shifting in their seats. A few nod, a few stare at the floor. Some look like they've been waiting for this moment. But even now it tastes like ashes, because oops doesn't stitch a neck or warm a grave. Here's your historical fact. Reverend Parris did offer a public apology in 1694, 2 years after the trials effectively ended. It was part sermon, part damage control. He admitted his role in the hysteria, but framed it as spiritual confusion rather than outright failure. Your fringe fact tonight: a number of those accused, or their relatives, later petitioned for compensation. The Massachusetts government actually paid out small sums to some families, decades after the fact. A few coins in exchange for a life. It was never enough. It never could be. And your scholarly debate: were the apologies sincere or politically necessary? Some historians argue Parris and others were motivated by fading influence and public pressure. Others say guilt, genuine, aching guilt, haunted them into confession. There's no clear answer, just a lot of silence where courage should have been. One of the girls apologises too, Ann Putnam Jr. You didn't think she would. After all, she named more people than anyone else. Sent 20 to the gallows with her testimony alone. And yet in 1706, 14 years after the worst of it, she stands before the congregation and says she's sorry. She calls herself deluded by Satan, says she thought she was doing God's work. She weeps, she begs for forgiveness. You weren't there for that one. But you hear about it. You hear how her voice cracked, how her hands trembled, how her apology was met with a mixture of sighs and sobs and silence. She stayed in Salem the whole time, never left, lived in the wreckage she helped build. You don't know if that makes her brave or just stubborn. Abigail Williams never apologised. She vanished, left town, never returned. She's never heard from again. It's easier to imagine her melting into the woods, cloak trailing behind her, dragging a reputation too heavy for anyone to carry. The town tries to move on, sort of. They plant new crops, repair the meeting house, repaint doors, but the wounds are stitched with poor thread. There are too many empty chairs at dinner tables, too many fields without their owners, too many names that make people look away. You walk past Gallows Hill one evening, and for the first time there's someone else standing there. A young boy. He's staring up at the beam that once held bodies like fruit from a poisoned tree. You ask him if he knows what happened here. He nods, says his mother told him, then asks, "Did they come back?" You pause. "Who?" "The witches," he says. "The real ones." You don't answer, because you don't know what to say. People talk about ghosts now, more than ever before. The village is convinced it's haunted. Women claim they hear crying near the old jail. Children refuse to walk past the meeting house alone. Even the dogs seem quieter. You'd laugh if it weren't so easy to believe. You hear about a man who saw Giles Corey's ghost wandering the edge of his field. Says he looked like stone come to life, says he vanished the moment their eyes met. The man moved to Boston the next week. Rebecca Nurse is said to appear in dreams, calm, silent, holding a lantern. They say that once you speak her name out loud, your next breath will taste like smoke. The haunting doesn't come from the dead, though. Not really. It's in the way people avoid each other now, in the glances passed over church pews, in how loud the silence feels when someone coughs during a sermon. Everyone remembers what happened when people started looking for evil in their neighbours. No one wants to risk remembering how easy it was. But forgetting doesn't mean it didn't happen. One woman keeps a list of every name, accused, hanged, confessed, dead in jail. She rewrites it every year so the ink never fades. She won't let Salem forget, not while she's breathing. One night you hear a knock at your door. A child stands there holding a candle, eyes wide. "Is it true?" she asks. "Is what true? That there were never any witches?" You open your mouth. You pause. You think of the girls in court screaming at nothing. You think of men in wigs hanging mothers while quoting the Psalms. You think of revenge disguised as virtue, fear dressed up as piety. "No," you say. "There were no witches here." "But people died," she says. "Yes," you reply. "They did." She nods once and walks away. The candlelight lingers for a moment, then disappears. You close the door and sit down, staring at the dying fire. It's 1697 now, 5 years since the gallows were last used. The field has grown back, the rope is gone, but the guilt, the memory, that never left. Some wounds don't heal. They echo. You wouldn't know, passing through Salem these days, that it had once tried to tear itself in half. The storefronts are freshly painted. The shutters close softly now instead of slamming. Children play in the dusty roads again, less wary, more wild. The meeting house roof no longer leaks. The market smells like bread instead of ash. And Gallows Hill? No one says that name anymore. It's just the ridge, or that place, or where the old trees grow, and the town is trying to forget. That's the new mission. Not justice, not mourning, just forget it happened. Forget who was hanged. Forget who screamed in court. Forget who pointed and who stayed silent. No more trials, no more spectral evidence, no more girls writhing on the floor like theatre students desperate for attention. It's all been swept under the rug like dust from a broken plate. You can feel it every time someone changes the subject, every time a name is left off a guest list, every time someone walks just a little faster past the old jailhouse. The village is constructing a collective memory that's half truth, half silence. Here's your historical fact. After the trials ended, the community entered a long, awkward period of self-repair. Though some of the judges and accusers apologised, others did not. Many in power quietly slipped back into their old roles. The town buried its shame not with monuments, but with silence and rebranding. Your fringe fact, Salem Village eventually changed its name to Danvers in 1752, The renaming wasn't officially about the trials, but let's not pretend it was coincidence. The stigma of what happened here clung like smoke. Changing the name was like changing the subject forever. And your scholarly debate, how much did post-trial Salem suffer from collective trauma? Some historians argue the town was psychologically scarred for generations, haunted not by ghosts but by guilt. Others say the Puritan mindset was so focused on survival that people simply moved on. Repressed, yes, but not broken. Just reshaped. You're not so sure. The land feels different here now. The trees bend a little more. The wind hisses a little longer before slipping past her. You see it in the eyes of older women in at the market, how they lower their gaze at familiar names. In the way churchgoers pray louder than necessary. Not in joy, not in peace. In defence. There are new people now. Strangers, settlers from neighbouring towns or the next colony over. They've heard the stories, of course. They ask questions. Some are curious, some are cruel. You hear one man laugh that it must have been quite a show. You watch an old woman stop in her tracks when he says that, her mouth hardening like she's biting glass. But mostly the newcomers don't ask. They build homes, they plough fields, and they're grateful to have cheap land that belonged to people who now rest in unmarked graves. That's not on the deed, of course, but it's in the soil. You walk past the site of the old jail, long abandoned now. The walls still stand, but the roof's half gone. Weeds grow through the stone. The town wants it torn down, but no one wants the job. There's talk of it being cursed, that anyone who touches it gets sick. You smile, not because you believe it, but because some places should stay broken. You stop at the meeting house next, where a new minister stands at the pulpit. The last one, Parris, was finally forced out after years of tension. He moved to another town, disgraced but still preaching. The new minister is young, nervous. You hear him speak about forgiveness, about moving forward, about rebuilding trust. He doesn't mention witchcraft. Doesn't have to. Everyone in that room hears the ghosts between the lines. You see Elizabeth Proctor there, sitting in the back pew. She survived. Her husband didn't. Her face is still. She doesn't sing the hymns anymore, just listens and breathes. One by one, the other survivors emerge from their quiet corners. Sarah Cloyce walks to the river every morning with a basket she never fills. Rebecca Nurse's family places flowers at the edge of the woods. Not on a grave, just the idea of one. The actual location of her burial was kept secret. Safer that way. Safer from vandals, from memory, from history. John Alden, one of the few men who escaped jail and cleared his name, now travels and tells his version of the story. It's always changing, always smoother than the last. You notice something else. Children asking questions, not just about who the witches were, but why it happened. Why their aunt's name isn't spoken, why the church records skip certain entries, why some families moved to Boston and never came back. And here comes the town's favourite response, it's best not to dwell. That phrase is everywhere now, embroidered on handkerchiefs, painted above the hearth, whispered during tense silences. It's not wisdom, it's a shield and a paper's a thin one. Because not dwelling is a luxury the dead don't have. You hear stories, quiet ones, around fire pits and in corners of barns, about people dreaming of the hanged, about faces appearing in windows, about footsteps that stop outside a door and never start again. It's not ghost they're hearing, it's conscience. But what do you do with a conscience when the world around you has agreed to bury it? You try to go about your life, you sell your goods, you fix your roof, you dig your fields, and sometimes in the middle of a perfectly normal day, a chill will sweep over you and you'll remember how easy it all was, how no one stopped it, how everyone knew, and how in the end, the devil didn't have to lift a single finger. The town did it all by itself. You'd think Hollywood would get it right. After all, the Salem witch trials have everything filmmakers dream about. Mystery, hysteria, old wooden buildings, girls in bonnets, men with torches, and the sweet, morbid promise of justice gone sideways. It's a ready-made horror script. All they have to do is press record, and yet they still manage to get it hilariously wrong. The first time you see a Hollywood version of Salem, it's in flickering black and white. The witches are beautiful, seductive, floating across rooms with smoke for legs and black cats purring in their laps. They cast spells with dramatic arm flourishes. Their eyes glow. Sometimes they wear low-cut dresses because apparently the devil loves cleavage. Not a single scene shows straw-filled cells, frost-bitten children, or the way a courtroom full of grown men once applauded a 12-year-old for pretending she was bitten by a ghost bird. In these stories, the witches are always real. The magic is real. The danger is mystical, not systemic. And worst of all, no one ever coughs from mould. You sit through the movie anyway, because you want to see what the world remembers. Here's your historical fact. Dramatised versions of the Salem witch trials have been around for centuries. Arthur Miller's No. 53 play The Crucible is the most famous, written as a political allegory during the Red Scare. Since then, Salem has become shorthand for mass hysteria in everything from film to TV to courtroom analogies. Your quirky fringe fact. In one early 20th century silent film, Salem was depicted as a town literally on fire, with witches summoning Satan in broad daylight while villagers screamed and fainted. One witch flies away on a broomstick because, of course, the Puritan caps are accurate, but that's where the realism ends. And your scholarly debate. Has pop culture helped preserve the memory of Salem, or distorted it beyond recognition? Some argue that retelling the trials through fiction keeps the conversation alive, makes it accessible. Others believe these versions water down the horror, turn tragedy into spectacle, and shift blame from people to fairy tales. Maybe it's both. You walk the streets of modern Salem now, yes, the real one, and it looks nothing like the place it once was. There's a wax museum, a haunted house, gift shops selling broom keychains, witch city shot glasses, and black lipstick that claims to be hex-proof. Tourists snap selfies in front of a plaque that reads Site of the Salem Witch Trials, then walk across the street for pumpkin-flavoured fudge. The irony is thick enough to bottle. You see a man dressed as a colonial judge giving tours. He quotes lines from The Crucible, explains that spectral evidence was the Puritan version of a Twitter rumour, and jokes about how witches today are better at marketing. He's not wrong, but the joke lands sour. You pause in front of a statue of Samantha from Bewitched, mid-nose wiggle, immortalised in bronze. She stands just a few blocks from where people were once chained for months, starving, freezing, dying. Tourists take pictures with her every day. You don't know whether to laugh or scream. Inside a nearby museum, they've got a recreation of the courtroom dimly lit with mannequins posed mid-trial. A girl in a white cap is frozen in the act of pointing. A man is mid-shout. The accused woman stands silent, always silent. You listen to the audio guide, which tells you that the witch hysteria lasted only months but left a legacy of injustice that echoes through American history. You think only months, as if that makes it less horrifying, as if you could count the hangings on your fingers and breathe easier because it didn't drag on for years. Outside, someone is holding a protest sign. Not about witches, about modern justice, about prisons, about the courts. You stop and watch as tourists walk past. Oh, there's eyes flicking toward the sign, then away. You wonder if they feel the connection. If they even see the line stretching from 1692 to now, because it's still there. Salem never ended, it just changed shape. You go into a bookstore and see shelf after shelf of witch books. Herbalism, spellwork, crystals, astrology, moon phases. The modern witch is here, repackaged, rebranded, and thriving. And she's not hiding. She's on TikTok, on Etsy, on candles and bookmarks and mugs that say Hex the Patriarchy. And here's the twist. Some of the people calling themselves witches now, they're descendants of the accused. Generations later, they've reclaimed the word that once got people killed. Not out of spite, but out of power. Out of a refusal to be erased. You talk to one of them. She says, "If my great-great-grandmother was hanged for being a witch, the least I can do is own the title." You nod. You admire the defiance. But you still feel the weight. Because when you walk out of the store, you pass the real memorial. Quiet, tucked away behind trees. Stone benches, each one carved with a name, a date, a final quote. "I am innocent." God knows I am innocent. More weight. No music plays there, no mannequins, just stone and silence and a place to sit if you're brave enough to do so. You take a seat, you read the names, and suddenly the broomsticks and t-shirts and witch cupcakes all fade. All you see is a teenage girl sobbing in a cold cell, a man's ribs breaking under stones, a grandmother gripping her baby as a noose tightens. And you think no movie can ever make this make sense. Because the real story of Salem, it doesn't have a twist ending, it just has echoes. You wouldn't expect to find ghosts in an asylum, but that's exactly where they ended up, or at least that's what the tour guides say. Decades after Salem tried to bury its past, the land did something peculiar. It repurposed itself. The site once known as Salem Village became a town called Danvers, and in 1874 they built a mental hospital there, on a hill overlooking the old witch trial grounds. Because nothing says fresh start like putting the most stigmatised people on the most cursed land in Massachusetts, Danvers State Hospital, red brick, gothic, towered, perched up high like it's watching the rest of the world and quietly judging it. Locals call it the castle on the hill. You see it now, all these years later, its windows boarded, ivy crawling up the stone like veins, the kind of building that makes you lower your voice without realising. The kind where you feel like something's listening. You walk the path leading up to it, cracked and overgrown, and can almost hear the clang of the old iron doors. For over a century, this place housed the outcast, the unstable, the inconvenient, women who cried too often, men who didn't speak, children no one wanted to deal with. The diagnoses were vague: hysteria, melancholia, moral insanity. Sound familiar? You can't help but see the echo. One century's witch is another's lunatic. Either way, she ends up behind locked doors, with strangers deciding if her mind is too wild for the world. Here's your historical fact. Danvers State Hospital, originally called the State Lunatic Hospital at Danvers, opened in the late 19th century and became infamous for its overcrowding, harsh treatments and experiments in early psychiatry. It was built on the same land once occupied by Salem Village, just a short walk from where the witch trials began. Your fringe fact: some claim that the asylum's central administration building was constructed directly atop the former home of Reverend Parris. Whether that's true or just eerie local lore, the symbolism is hard to ignore. Centuries of fear and judgment layered on the same cursed soil. And your scholarly debate: was the hospital a progressive step forward in mental health treatment, or just a modern-day witch trial in disguise? Some historians argue that Danvers was ahead of its time, tempting at least at first to humanise the mentally ill. Others see it as a new form of institutional cruelty, where people were labelled dangerous for being inconvenient and hidden away until they were forgotten. You sneak inside the ruins, because you have to. The halls are long, the walls flaking paint like skin, the raw silence so thick it's hard to swallow. Empty wheelchairs sit in corners like spiders waiting to move. A single shoe lies in the middle of a hallway with no explanation. You find old papers scattered in a room, scribbled notes from patients, some with just one word repeated over and over. Help. Cold. No. There's no mention of witches, but there doesn't have to be, because you know this pattern by now. How fear dresses itself up in clinical language, how society takes those it can't control and locks them away under the guise of care. You stand in what was once the women's ward and think about the accused from 1692, how they were called unnatural, unstable, threatening, how their words were twisted, their bodies examined, their silence taken as proof of guilt. They were watched, judged by panels of men in robes, told that their reality was wrong, that the harm done to them was their own fault, that truth was whatever the powerful said it was. And now here you are, 2 centuries later, in a room where another woman scratched her name into the wall with her fingernails and whispered to shadows because no one else would listen. The lines aren't just blurred between the 2 eras, they're fused. Salem became Danvers, the gallows became bedpans, the ropes became restraints, same fear, new architecture. You exit the hospital slowly, passing beneath the broken archway that once welcomed patients with a lie. Health, hope, healing. You don't feel any of those. You make your way through what's left of the hospital grounds. Nature is reclaiming the place. Trees grow through windows, vines slither up support beams, but the bones of the building are still there, refusing to fully die. And beneath those bones, the whispers remain. Locals say the place is haunted. Paranormal investigators flock here with voice recorders and camera rigs. They catch what they claim are moans, cries, footsteps. One even insists he heard a girl say, "Don't let them take me." But you don't need ghosts to know this land is haunted. You just need memory. You walk a little further and find a small fenced graveyard. Most of the headstones are worn flat. The names are gone, erased by time or neglect. These were the forgotten patients, buried with numbers instead of names. Buried in rows like mistakes. You kneel beside one, you whisper the names of the hanged. They don't answer. But the wind picks up. When Danvers State finally closed its doors in 1992, most of the buildings were abandoned. Developers later tore some of it down to build luxury apartments, Yes, apartments. You can now rent a unit where patients once begged for water, where women were sterilised, where electric currents replaced understanding. They advertise granite countertops, stainless steel, historic charm, no mention of what's buried under the floorboards. And somewhere out there, a girl is lighting a candle and calling herself a witch. And somewhere else, a woman is screaming behind a locked door. And no one believes her. Because centuries pass, but we still decide who gets to be heard, who gets to be saved, who gets to be remembered. There's a strange smell drifting through Salem these days. It's not smoke or decay or the damp rot of old court records. It's incense, sweet, spicy, tinged with something floral. You catch it outside a narrow brick storefront downtown, sandwiched between a coffee shop and a haunted house attraction. There's a painted sign above the door, The Witch's Hearth. Inside, candles flicker on shelves, bundles of herbs dangle from the ceiling like drying fish, and a woman in a velvet cloak offers you tea and a smile that somehow feels older than her face. Welcome to modern witchcraft. It's not what the Puritans feared. No dark pacts, no baby eating, no midnight dances with horned gods, no one's flying through the air or cursing your cow, but witches are back and they're louder than ever. Only this time they're not being dragged to the gallows. They're being followed on Instagram, they're on podcasts. They're teaching moon cycles on YouTube and selling spell kits on Etsy. They've reclaimed the word witch, stitched it back together from centuries of trauma, and set it proudly on their chests like armour. And Salem? It's cashing in. You walk through the town centre and pass a dozen shops selling witch hats, potion bottles, tarot decks, and hand-embroidered aprons that say, "Blessed be y'all." Tourists line up to have their fortunes read. A girl in a corset asks her friend if this cauldron is dishwasher safe. You overhear a couple arguing about whether to take the Haunted Witch Trials trolley tour or do a witchy pub crawl first. The trials are now a theme. You see a t-shirt that says, "I got hexed in Salem and all I got was this lousy trauma." Another one reads, "Team Tituba." You almost laugh. Almost. Here's your historical fact. In the late 20th century, Salem transformed into a cultural epicenter of modern witchcraft, particularly the Wiccan and neo-pagan movements. Practitioners began to reclaim the word witch as a spiritual identity rooted in nature-based rituals, feminine power and healing. Salem became both tourist trap and sacred ground. Your fringe fact, in 970 Laurie Cabot, known as the official witch of Salem, opened one of the town's first witchcraft stores. She taught classes, performed rituals, and wore a black cloak and pentacle in public, often facing ridicule. Today she's seen as a pioneer. Her store is still open, and tonight's scholarly debate. Does this modern witchcraft movement honour the victims of 1692 or overshadow them? Some argue it's a celebration of resilience, a way to reclaim power in a town that once punished it. Others say the commercialization turns real suffering into merchandise and spiritual cosplay. The answer, as usual, is complicated. You wander deeper into the old town and find yourself standing in the shadow of the Salem Witch Trials Memorial. It's quiet here, less foot traffic, maybe too subtle for Instagram. The memorial is simple, a granite wall with 20 stone benches, each etched with a name and a date of execution. You sit on the one that says Bridget Bishop, June 10th, 1892. You don't hear candles flickering, you don't hear drums or chants. You hear wind and footsteps and the faint shuffling of people trying to decide if they want to remember what actually happened here. And then, from the corner of your eye, you see them, modern witches, real ones, not costumes, not actors. They come in quietly. Some wear jeans, some wear cloaks, one wears Doc Martens and carries a bouquet of black-eyed Susans. They walk up to the stones and place their offerings. A rose here, a crystal there. One woman kneels and whispers something you can't hear. You don't want to eavesdrop, but part of you leans in anyway. She says, "We see you now." And that sticks with you, because maybe that's what it's all about. Not erasing the past, not replacing it with candles and bath salts and hashtags, just seeing. Seeing the people who died here, seeing the fear, the injustice, the silence, naming it, sitting with it, and then standing up and saying, "Not again." You walk to another store later, one with a crooked sign and a dusty window. Inside, an older man talks to a teenager about setting up an ancestor altar. "You don't have to believe everything," he says. "Just listen. The dead speak if you're quiet enough." That night, the moon is full. Of course it is. You walk along the cobblestone street past flickering lanterns and costumed tour guides, past people laughing and people crying and people who can't decide how they feel about any of it. You pass by Gallows Hill again, now mostly a parking lot. You see someone leave a bundle of sage on the curb, a poor substitute for a memorial maybe. But it's something. Salem's not a town anymore. It's a paradox. It's both graveyard and garden, a place where justice was buried and power was reborn, where the same streets that once dragged women to their deaths now celebrate them with candlelight and glitter. It doesn't make sense. And it doesn't have to. You turn back toward your inn, and in the distance you hear a group of people singing, not loudly, not for an audience, just a low hum, a song with no words, a spell with no name. And you think, maybe this is what healing looks like. Messy, loud, commercialized, chaotic. But still, healing. You think it ended in 1692. You hope it did. But the further you drift from the gallows and bonnets and cracked wood of colonial Salem, the more you realise the pattern didn't die, it just changed costumes. No more ghosts, no more witches, no more devil's birds fluttering behind the judge's bench. Now it's subtler, cleaner, digitised even. But the rhythm is the same. Fear rises, facts collapse, and people start pointing fingers before asking questions. The Salem witch trials weren't a one-off. They were a blueprint. And today, you see it everywhere. You're sitting in a classroom in the 1980s, fluorescent lights buzzing, watching a teacher nervously explain that some students, some, might be involved in satanic rituals. It's not a joke. It's called the Satanic Panic, and it spreads like spilled ink across America. Suddenly, daycares are crime scenes. Therapists are detectives. Parents are convinced their children are being recruited by underground cults. And people believe it. They really believe it. Here's your historical fact. In the late 20th century, the United States experienced a wave of hysteria known as the Satanic Panic. Sparked by a mix of sensational media, pseudoscientific psychology, and deep cultural anxiety, it led to hundreds of false accusations, mostly against daycare workers and parents, many of whom were imprisoned on zero physical evidence. Your fringe fact. One of the most infamous cases, the McMartin preschool trial in California, lasted 7 years, cost $15 million and ended in no convictions. At one point, children claimed they were flown through tunnels and molested by witches on broomsticks. Their statements were coached by suggestive adults, and yet the public believed it all. And your scholarly debate. Why are moral panics so easy to ignite and so hard to extinguish? Some argue it's about power, about who controls the narrative when fear takes over. Others say it's evolutionary, that humans are hardwired to seek patterns and enemies. The truth probably lives somewhere in the anxiety that bubbles between both ideas. You flip to the 1950s and land in a black and white world of paranoia and briefcases. It's not witches this time, it's communists. Joseph McCarthy waves papers in front of microphones, claiming to know who among us is working for the enemy. Lives are destroyed, careers ruined, and people vanish into unemployment or exile, all for a whisper of suspicion. Arthur Miller wrote The Crucible during that very hysteria, placing 50s America on trial through the lens of 1692. He saw the blueprint too. The ghosts of Salem were alive and well, just red instead of spectral. Now fast forward again, 2000s to 10s, 20s. You're scrolling social media. Accusations fly in threads. Hashtags flare like brush fires. And someone somewhere is getting cancelled in real time. Sometimes it's justice. Sometimes it's performative. Sometimes it's just digital pitchforks and 1,000 faceless judges screaming at once. No courtroom, no evidence, just outrage. You're not here to dismiss accountability. But the machinery, it's familiar. Salem didn't invent hysteria. It didn't invent public shaming. But it was an early, vivid portrait of what happens when a people stop asking why and leap straight to who. And in every moral panic since, you hear echoes of the girls in the courtroom screaming, twitching, pointing at the accused, and daring the world not to believe them. Because doubt in times of panic is treated like treason. You see it in schools too. One year, it's a kid claiming another cast a spell on them after watching Harry Potter. Another year, it's a teenager suspended for drawing a pentagram in the margins of their notebook. You'd think we'd have evolved past fearing symbols, but here we are. You speak to a teacher in the South who tells you she's not allowed to say the word witch in class, not even when teaching history. She whispers this like she's confessing a crime, You pass a small-town library that's removed the crucible from its shelves after a parent complained it promoted ungodly ideas. They're protecting children from knowledge. And just like that, the girls are back. New faces, new names, same chaos. The paranoia mutates. It targets immigrants next, or refugees, or people with different accents, people who dress differently. It doesn't need a reason. Just the right kind of fear at the right kind of time. You talk to someone who lost their job because a neighbour decided they were unnatural. No evidence, just rumour. You listen to a podcast about deep conspiracy forums, where people genuinely believe their enemies drink blood and worship Satan in basements. These aren't jokes. These are movements, and they're growing. You think about how easy it is to rewrite someone's identity with a rumour, how fast suspicion hardens into gospel, and how long it takes for the truth to dig itself out of a grave. You walk back through modern Salem and look at the crowds buying witch souvenirs, smiling for selfies with statues of fictional enchantresses. You wonder if they know how fragile it all is, that all it takes is one spark, one child's lie, one neighbour's grudge, one media frenzy, and the whole thing resets. Witches aren't the point. They never were. Fear just needs a face. And Salem has taught the world how to draw it. But here's the part that stays with you the most. In all of these panics, centuries apart, the pattern repeats. 1. Someone cries out. 2. People believe them too fast or not at all. 3. A scapegoat is chosen. 4. The accused is silenced, destroyed or erased. 5. The crowd walks away, convinced they did the right thing. You wonder what Salem would look like now with Wi-Fi and TikTok. You wonder what Ann Putnam's DMs would look like after a viral video of her seizing in church. You wonder who we'd hang today, just not from trees, from platforms, from feeds, from memory. The scaffolding's still there, you just can't see it anymore. The thing about Salem is that it never really gives you closure. Not the town, not the story, not the legacy. Even now, centuries later, scholars argue in dimly lit rooms and at dry academic conferences over what actually caused the whole thing. Everyone wants a clean answer, a perfect theory, something you can tuck into a textbook with a nice sterile heading like The Social Factors Behind the Witchcraft Crisis of 1692. But Salem laughs at that, softly, bitterly, because nothing about what happened fits in a neat little paragraph. There are theories, though. Oh, there are so many theories. Some historians blame politics, local rivalries, family feuds, disputes over who got to control the pulpit and whose cows kept trampling whose corn. That makes sense. You've seen how power can wrap itself in the language of morality and use God as a crowbar to pry land from a neighbour's grip. You remember how many accusers ended up with the land of the accused? Suspicious? Always. Others point to economics. Salem Village was a powder keg of resentment, poor farmers scraping by, while Salem town just a few miles away bathed in trade money and shiny silver candlesticks. Envy, stress, bad harvests, back-breaking labour with no reward. These things twist the soul. They make it easy to believe someone must be causing your suffering. And it's always someone who looks just different enough to make your blood suspicious. You've got the religion camp too, of course. The Puritans saw the devil behind every shadow. Their theology didn't exactly encourage nuance. Everything was black and white, saved or damned, covenant or curse. The world was God's battleground, and if you tripped over your words or cried in the wrong direction, well, that might have been Satan peeking out of your mouth. And then there's the one everyone loves because it sounds just weird enough to be true. Ergot poisoning. Here's your historical fact. Ergot is a fungus that can grow on rye and other grains in wet, cool conditions. When consumed, it can cause hallucinations, muscle spasms, convulsions, and paranoia. Sound familiar? The ergot theory, first floated in the 1970s, suggests that the young girls in Salem may have unknowingly eaten contaminated rye, sparking genuine physical symptoms and mental confusion. It's elegant. It's scientific. It's also, frankly, kind of creepy. Your fringe fact. Ergot is chemically similar to LSD. So yes, it's entirely possible that part of the infamous witch fits were triggered by teenagers accidentally tripping, centuries before Timothy Leary ever set foot near a lab coat. But here's the thing. Most scholars now doubt the ergot theory. Why? Because it doesn't explain everything. Not the political manoeuvring. Not the forced confessions. Not the perfectly timed land grabs. It treats hysteria like a medical problem, but ignores the social contagion of power and fear. You can poison bread, but you can't poison motives. And so we end up back in the swirl. Another theory says it was puberty. The afflicted girls were all young, hormonal, vulnerable, caught between the iron of Puritan repression and the lightning strike of adolescence. If you're not allowed to cry, scream, flirt or run, if your body's not yours and your voice is locked in a church pew, maybe the only way out is to collapse on the floor and start seeing ghosts. And suddenly you're not a liability, you're a prophet. Of course, that doesn't explain why adults joined in, why magistrates nodded along, why neighbours dragged each other to court. Puberty doesn't hang 19 people. Fear does. Ambition does. And sometimes boredom. Another scholar claims the trials were a result of the slow collapse of community, that Salem's social glue was failing. Neighbours didn't trust each other anymore. Church attendance was down. The wilderness felt closer, and when people stop feeling like they belong, they either leave or lash out. In 1692, they lashed out. You sit with all these ideas in your head, like a court of theories, each presenting its evidence, each insisting it knows the real reason. But the longer you listen, the more you realise none of them are wrong. They're all fragments of a shattered mirror. No one thing explains Salem, because no one thing ever does. The girls who pointed, the judges who nodded, the neighbours who watched, the people who prayed as others hanged, they were all part of it. Because the real answer, maybe the worst one, is this. People are capable of anything when they believe they're doing what's right, even evil, especially evil. You visit an archive late one afternoon, the light slanting in through high windows. You read through testimony after testimony. You see how the language shifts over time. At first, the accused try to plead their innocence. Then they beg. Then they start to speak in parables, riddles, anything to stay alive. By the end, you can almost hear the despair carved into the ink. But here's the thing that sticks with you most. Very few people ever said, "I'm sorry." And even fewer said, "I was wrong." It's easier to say, "I was misled," or "I was confused," or "the devil tricked me." But to admit you helped destroy someone, that you cheered while they choked, that you watched the light go out of their eyes and believed it was justice, that's harder. You close the archive book, you walk outside and you think, Salem was not a glitch. It was not a one-time horror show. It was a mirror, held up uncomfortably to the face of human nature. And the worst part, we keep looking into it and keep pretending we don't recognise what we see. The cell is smaller than you thought it would be. Rough walls, barely shoulder-width apart, and air so still it's like even the wind has stopped coming here. The only light filters in through cracks in the wood above, grey, filtered, uninterested. You sit on a thin mat of straw, damp with age and rot, the smell curling into your nose and settling behind your eyes. You try not to breathe too deeply, but you can't hold your breath forever. Your name was whispered 2 nights ago. That's all it takes. You saw the way your neighbour hesitated before mentioning you to the magistrate. His voice dipped in fake concern. "I don't mean to accuse, but..." followed by the long, fanged pause. Then your name. Now here you are, in the dark, alone. Except, of course, you're not. You hear someone coughing in the next cell. A dry, wet sound that echoes through the stone like the body is giving up one breath at a time. Someone else prays in a language that's been mostly swallowed by time. Latin, Gaelic, you're not sure. But it doesn't sound like any devil you know. It sounds scared. The straw shifts beneath you, full of movement you can't see. Your legs ache from the awkward bend they've held for hours. Your wrists are raw. The guards took your shoes. You don't know why. Maybe no one ever asked. And still, even in the pit of this hell, you wait. For someone to open the door, for someone to call your name, for someone to believe you didn't do it, even though there's no it to do. Here's your historical fact. By the end of the Salem witch trials, more than 200 people had been accused. Dozens were imprisoned for months in horrific conditions. No heat, little food, rampant illness. Some gave birth in jail, others died there, never tried, never convicted, just forgotten. Your fringe fact, during one winter, prisoners were forced to pay for their own chains. Yes, you read that right. If you were accused of witchcraft, you were expected to cover the cost of your own incarceration, including shackles, food, and the cell itself. Those who couldn't pay were simply left in worse conditions, or worse, kept longer. And your scholarly debate, how much did poverty influence who was accused and who was spared? Historians argue that class was often as much a factor as gender or religious piety. Wealthy or well-connected individuals were more likely to avoid the rope, even if they were named. Meanwhile, the poor, especially poor women, had no defence. Accusation alone was a sentence. You curl your knees in tighter, trying to keep warm. The air tastes like iron and mildew, and somewhere above someone is singing. Just a thread of melody, soft and off-key, but it carries. Maybe it's for comfort. Maybe it's defiance. In a place like this, maybe it's both. You remember how it started? The twitching girls, the panicked whispers, the hungry looks on the faces of men who suddenly found themselves powerful again. You saw the glint in their eyes when the girls pointed. You saw how quickly everyone adapted, how suspicion became currency, how silence became guilt. You think about the ones who already died. Sarah Good, hanged while her child wailed in prison. Giles Corey, pressed to death with stones until his last breath came out as a curse. Rebecca Durr, nurse, grandmother, churchgoer, executed with hymns still on her lips. You wonder if they knew the truth at the end, that none of this was about witches, that it was about fear and control and the terrible ease with which people burn their own when they start believing the fire makes them holy. A key turns in the lock. You don't move. A guard opens the door and says your name, not like he knows it, like he's reading it from a list that just got shorter. You rise, your joints scream in protest. You follow him up the narrow stairs, feet bare against stone. The hallway smells like sweat and smoke and something older, like grief that dried out and stuck to the walls. They bring you to the courtroom. It's smaller than you imagined, and darker. Fewer people now, fewer outbursts. The hysteria is burning itself out. But the process still grinds on. You stand before the magistrates, face swollen, body shaking. You do not plead, you do not beg, you speak. I am not a witch. And in that moment, it doesn't matter. Not really. Because you're not there to defend yourself. You're there to serve as a symbol, as proof that the devil still walks among them. They need you to be guilty, not because of what you've done, but because of who you are. Quiet, defiant, unmarried, opinionated, poor. It could be any of those things, or all of them. You think of the others still locked in their cells, waiting, wondering if they'll be next. If anyone will come. If someone, somewhere, will say, enough. Your verdict is not read today. The court is postponing again. Evidence must be reviewed. You're returned to your cell. You are not hanged, not yet, but you are forgotten. Not famous like Tituba, not loved like Elizabeth Proctor. You're just another name, another scribbled line in a book no one reads. But you are real, and you lived through this. You don't know if that's a victory or just a scar. When night comes, you watch the moon slice its way through the cracks above. You count the stars. You name the ones you remember. And somewhere out there, someone is writing a story about Salem. They're turning it into a play, a novel, a costume, a legend. They won't know your face. But they'll know the feeling. They'll hear the cell door close. They'll taste the straw. They'll understand for a brief, shivering second what it means to be accused without cause, to be punished without proof, to wait in the dark while the world outside forgets you. And maybe, if they listen closely enough, they'll hear you still whispering. You were never a witch, but you were always dangerous, because you remembered. You've come back to the hill, the real one this time, not the trolley tour version or the strip mall replica with fake mist and strobe lights. No, you're at the edge of town again, where the trees lean just a little too close and the grass grows in tufts like it's remembering where not to grow. It's quiet here. Even the crickets seem to lower their voices. You sit on a flat stone, not a marked memorial, just a rock shaped by time, and let the silence do the talking. It's been a long journey, through whispers in church pews and cries in courtrooms, through jails and gallows, through denial and apology, through museums and horror movies and hashtags. And here you are, still breathing, still blinking in the dark, still trying to make sense of what Salem was and what it became. You close your eyes and think about them again. The accused, the forgotten, the inconvenient ones. Their names are with you now, stitched into the lining of your thoughts. Sarah Good, Giles Corey, Bridget Bishop, Mary Easty, Martha Carrier. So many more, not witches, not devils, just people. Angry, tired, honest, stubborn, poor, unlucky. The kind of people who ask questions. The kind of people who don't bow fast enough. And you wonder, what if it were you? You've felt misunderstood before. You've been judged unfairly. You've seen how quickly stories twist. How fast a crowd can turn. Salem just did it louder. In public. With ropes and stones instead of hashtags and headlines. But the fear, the need to belong, the pull of power disguised as righteousness, that still lives in the marrow of modern life. You remember what we talked about back in section 1 when this all began? How you probably wouldn't survive this, and you didn't. Not really, not unchanged. Salem leaves a mark, not just on your understanding of history, but on your understanding of people. What we're capable of when we're scared, when we're told that doubt is weakness, that our neighbour's pain is our protection. It's tempting to look at all this and say, we've learned, we're better now. But if we're honest, we know the truth. Salem doesn't live in the past. It lives in patterns. It repeats every time someone gets called dangerous for being different. Every time fear becomes law. Every time we mistake silence for peace. Every time we don't ask enough questions before we light the match. Still, there's hope in here too. You've seen it. In the apologies, however late. In the modern witches who reclaimed a word once used to destroy them. In the scholars still trying to piece together the facts. In the tourists who stand quietly at the memorial and just for a moment put down their phones and feel it. Because remembrance is resistance. Every time you say their names, every time you challenge the myth, every time you ask what really happened, you unearth something buried. And not just in Salem, in you. So now, as you lie back against the grass and let the night pull you down into rest, let that memory settle. Let it keep you just awake enough to feel the weight of what was, and just sleepy enough to let go of the need to solve it all tonight. The moon is high, the stars are scattered. There's a soft wind across your cheek, like someone brushing back your hair and whispering you made it. And you did. You walked through fire and gallows and silence and shouting and ended up here, in the quiet after. There's no curse waiting, no devil behind the trees, just the knowledge that stories matter, that truth needs remembering, and that fear, left unchecked, always wears a familiar face. Now, pull the blanket up to your chin. Let the ghosts rest for a while. They've told their story, and you were listening.